you.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Thursday, March 26, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, what's going on at the border and assessing Biden's immigration policy with senior investigative reporter Aura Bogado from Reveal and Marcia Brown, writing fellow at the American Prospect. Also on the program today, Biden taps Harris to address those migration issues at both the southern border and in Central America. New unemployment numbers have dipped below 700,000 this week for the first week in over a year. And the newest Cuomo scandal. Turns out he gave his family and friends special state testing privileges. Shocking. President Joe Manchin says voting rights must be bipartisan. President Manchin also, however, calls for a big infrastructure bill funded by taxes on the wealthy. President gives, the president takes. Meanwhile, the first transgender nominee, Rachel Levine, confirmed as Assistant Health Secretary. AstraZeneca pushes back on claims. Their new assessment shows vaccine is effective as they said it was in the first place, according to them. The Federal Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals rules that states may restrict open carry laws, as Labor Secretary encourages unionizing in Alabama, or I should say union organizing in Alabama. Chuck Schumer says the PRO Act gets a vote if it has 50 co-sponsors. San Francisco janitors on strike for COVID safety. Virginia is the first southern state in the country to abolish the death penalty. Democrats decry the Trump holdover who is delaying COVID checks. They want Biden to fire him. And New York lawmakers have supposedly struck a deal to legalize cannabis in New York State. Wouldn't be the first time they've announced this, but we shall see. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. Joining me, as always, Emma Vigeland. Emma, how are you today?
I'm doing well there. Almost stumbled over my name.
No, I didn't. I was very proud. I pronounced it correctly. Emma Vigeland.
Yeah, there's three syllables.
Yes. No,
right.
I did do that right. We were just talking about before the show that I mispronounced your last name for the first 2 months that you were working here.
I didn't really know this just because sometimes people breeze through the E, and even I, if I'm, tired or had 2 glasses of wine, I don't know why I'm saying my last name in that instance, but I can breeze through that E.
That's weird.
It's Vigeland, but it's Vigeland.
Right? All right.
Well, we should start doing my last name property, which is Lech.
Is it?
Yeah, that's my grandpa's like the only one who pronounces it right.
I'm not saying it correctly, though, Matt. Like, I have relatives that say it like Vigeland, and apparently that's correct, but I cannot bring myself to take myself seriously and say it like that.
All right. Well, there we go. This has been I had a lot of things I've learned already in today's program. We're only a couple minutes into it.
There we go.
For the life of me, I can't figure out what Amazon is doing. We had a great interview, incidentally, with a fascinating book written by Alec McGillis on Amazon yesterday that you should check out. Fulfilled. But Amazon, of course, is in the midst of a union organizing drive that lasts. There is a vote ongoing. It has been going on for over 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks. It will continue, I believe, until March 29th. 6,000 union workers in Bessemer, Alabama, or I should say 6,000 Amazon workers in Bessemer, Alabama. There have been enough to come out and say that they want a union for the National Labor Relations Board to say that a vote can take place. The vote is happening now. And Amazon seems to be, and I can't quite tell what the deal is here, frankly. Sometimes you get Twitter accounts that go rogue, or just Twitter accounts that are just not handled very well. But it's not just Amazon news. But let's put this up. Well, let's start with the first one from the actual Amazon. Brendan, wasn't there also an Amazon basically official who decided to take issue with the fact that Bernie Sanders was heading down there?
So then he decided to deem Amazon's workplace as the Bernie Sanders of employers, but not quite right. That's not quite right, because we actually deliver a progressive workplace.
Wait, this is now, you're quoting from Dave Clark.
Yes.
Now, who is Dave Clark? Brendan, will you tell us who Dave Clark is?
He is a husband, father, and also CEO of Amazon WW Consumer.
Worldwide Consumer.
Worldwide Consumer.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what Worldwide Consumer is within Amazon, but
he's also a University of Tennessee MBA supply chain alum.
Wow, yeah, that was obvious. And here he is. He's, like Emma said, he's welcoming Senator Sanders to Birmingham and appreciate his push for a progressive workplace. And he says, I often say we are the Bernie Sanders of employers, but that's not quite right, because we actually deliver a progressive workplace. Now,
so that's a slight against Bernie Sanders, as well as a lie about their workplace conditions, as he pretends to welcome Bernie Sanders to Birmingham as he walks alongside union workers.
This is another strike against the word progressive, because you can call it, like, what does progressive actually mean if it can be deployed like this? It's not to say a unionized workplace, particularly, right? Like,
well, it's also, I mean, I think, the idea that you put like an electronic buzzer around your workers in your warehouse, because if they're dawdling in any way and they're not being as productive as you want them to be in any given literally moment or second, I mean, I think that.
Yeah, and the fact that they are fighting tooth and nail from paying the families of workers that died on their premises, the fact that they tried to skirt COVID regulations very early and fired retaliatorily an organizer in Queens, I believe, or in Long Island, who had been trying to fight for safer conditions at the start of the pandemic. That might not be categorized as a progressive workplace. $25 million they've spent, at the very least, in Bessemer to keep these people from unionizing. But the real question is, why are they doing that? It's interesting, because if you go back and you listen to our interview with Alec yesterday and read his book, you will find, and you had a great question for him on this, Emma, if I remember correctly. It was the Democratic coalition includes a lot of just general people who really like Amazon. In fact, I think he said that Amazon was considered one of the more trusted institutions
by a lot of Democratic voters. So what could be going on here is an attempt by Amazon to find a foil that they think will appeal to some cohort of Democratic voters. Democrats are in power, and basically get some type of pushback. I mean, the idea that they're being somehow victimized by Bernie Sanders or progressive, Democrats or socialists or whatever it is that they want to say, by unionization is somehow victimizing them. Giving workers some type of protections is somehow victimizing them. Let's put up the Amazon News.
So they responded to Mark Pocan, who was citing...
Dave Clark Congressman Pocan responded to Dave Clark.
Right. There we go.
And to that comment about, we consider ourselves, we get stuff done. We actually make things more progressive. And Representative Mark Pocan said, paying workers $15 an hour doesn't make you a progressive workplace when you union bust and make workers urinate in bottles. Now, let's take that in three parts. One, their $15 an hour is less. And we heard this from the union organizer who came on the program a couple of weeks ago, is less than other similarly situated jobs in that specific area. A lot of people say, like, well, Bessemer, Alabama, maybe you're not making that much money. Well, there are other not massive corporations whose CEOs haven't made, I don't know, what is it, $30 billion this year, maybe more. Jeff Bezos. I mean, remember, Jeff Bezos is the guy who said, like, I don't even know what to do with my money. I may have to fund stuff to go to space just to figure out how to spend this stuff.
Let alone that they fought tooth and nail against raising their minimum wage and had to be shamed publicly by none other than Bernie Sanders with the Stop Bezos Act.
Indeed. And so the $15 an hour that they're paying in Bessemer, Alabama is not even necessarily that competitive. There's only just so many jobs. Keep that back up, Brendan. And so Pocan responds, and he says, the $15 an hour doesn't make you a progressive workplace when you union bust. And I think that, it's an uncontroversial statement. Spent at least $25 million on trying to bust the union and make workers urinate in water bottles. Now, we heard a story yesterday just that one of these workers had to hide the fact that he was urinated with his forklift at one point. But the number of... And so Amazon News comes back with, you don't really believe the peeing in the bottles thing, do you? If that were true, nobody would work for us. The truth is we have over 1 million incredible employees around the world who are proud of what they do and have great wages and health care from day one. Now, of course, one has to wonder, then why would these people be trying to unionize?
Yeah. I mean, apparently they have the best workplace in the world, and nobody in history has ever worked at a place with poor conditions because they needed a job. The fact that we have millions of employees at our massive behemoth of a company that's took advantage of government contracts and basically cut corners with corporate taxes. I mean, that's evidence that we treat our employees who are beholden to us with complete kindness. It's just such backwards thinking.
Well, I mean, the number of reporters who came out and started to show screen grabs of conversations they've had with employees at Amazon, whether it was, via Signal or whether it was texts or whether it was emails saying, yeah, no, I got fired for trying to pee or this and that. And there's actually a wonderful piece by Corey Robin that he wrote, I guess, maybe 20 years ago that was in the Boston Globe, giving the history. But it wasn't until 1998 that there was any type of federal laws saying that you have to give workers bathroom breaks. So it's not that, this has been a problem in our workforce, but Amazon is the number 2 employer in the country. And the way that they work their warehouse people is highly problematic. And I think they realize that this unionization sort of genie is out of the bottle. Mm-hmm. They may win or lose in Bessemer, Alabama, but I think they're afraid this is going to go. this is going to spread like wildfire. And so now they're starting to wage a different type of battle here. They're trying to make those people who are looking for decent working conditions in Amazon, make people who are aware of the problem of Amazon's size and monopoly. And it's not just like, the implications for consumers, but other competitors, what it does to our society writ large. Again, listen to what Alec McGillis had to tell us yesterday. I mean, it really explains, I think, really the problem with a behemoth this size.
But Amazon News is reporting that they don't actually pee in bottles. So I don't know who to believe, the reporters and the thousands of workers reporting awful conditions, or this PR Twitter account that calls itself news in order to deflect. I don't know.
I mean, that they call themselves news. Maybe sometimes
they have a blue check.
There you go. We will be talking more about Amazon in the weeks to come. I would imagine, probably the months, probably the years, and we will see. But I should also say that the incoming Labor Secretary Marty Walsh gave a shout out in an interview to supporting the unionization efforts of people in Alabama, and there's, as far as I know, there's only one unionization effort that's going on right now in Alabama. He didn't say Amazon specifically, but I think this has got Amazon worried because this type of shout out, of course, it echoes what President Biden said, but hopefully we get a labor secretary who is going to, that is going to be basically that signals where the labor secretary is going to be on these issues going forward. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about immigration. Aura Bogado will be with us in just a moment, and then later we'll be talking to Marcia Brown. Right back after this. Okay, I want to welcome to the program a senior investigative reporter and producer for Reveal News, Aura Bogado. She has been working on the immigration beat for years now. Aura, welcome to the program. I'm here with Emma Vigeland. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So let's just start with the way that what's going on at the border, I guess, and really, I mean, dealing with the warehousing of these children at the border, how it's being portrayed in the media, how it's being referred to. There's almost these two competing narratives. One is there's this narrative of like there's a so-called surge at the border. And this is creating a crisis for the country. And then there's other people who are saying there's a humanitarian crisis, at the border because we're warehousing children who, we're warehousing them just period, but we're doing so contrary to the laws of this country in terms of how we're supposed to be treating these kids. What is your perspective on this?
Yeah, I mean, it is a humanitarian crisis. Anytime that you are, as you say, warehousing children or any humans for any sustained period of time, that is a humanitarian crisis. You can think about anything from sanitary issues to the potential for abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse in these kinds of facilities is high. This idea that it is a crisis, like it came out of nowhere, it's a kind of almost like a natural phenomena is, I think, how I perceive a lot of the kind of framing around this. It was completely expected under this new administration. We had moments when this happened in the prior administration. There are very real reasons for why people, including children, want to come here. It often is rooted in in violence and a whole bunch of other things that I hope that, we can get to in this segment. But this idea that it is like somehow a surprise, it's not a surprise. I know that I can tell you from our immigration, our small immigration team, I work with my great colleague, Laura C. Morrell, and we've known that this is coming. So it's not a surprise. It is an increased number, and it's an increased number that this administration should have been prepared for, given that they campaigned a lot around immigration. It was a talking point.
All right, so let's go through and let's just for a moment reserve, put aside, but we will get to the sort of things that drive people from their countries and discuss that in the context of Vice President Harris, who's just been tasked with sort of supposedly dealing with those issues in those countries. But aside from that for a moment, and we will get to that, what were the sort of like mechanical things, if you will, that you guys were aware of that surely the incoming Biden administration would have been aware of, that have led to the issues that we have today?
So do you mean in terms of like what the administration should have been prepared for once children were already here?
Yeah, well, that, and you just said that there were signs and clearly ways for the administration to predict. What were those signs? What are those things that are what forces are working that would have been predictable for the administration?
Right. So the political forces are this broad understanding, not only in Central America, but throughout the world, that Trump was really tough on immigration. He and his administration instituted the zero tolerance policy, which resulted in the separation of children from their families. That is unique to that administration. That hadn't been done in a massive scale like that ever before. It's unlikely that it would happen again, although it could. And so the idea that this person was leaving office and Biden was then going to come in, that alone is going to make people think that it may be easier to come at this time. It makes coyotes think that it may be, well, I don't know exactly what they may or may not think, but they can certainly spread that idea around. It's also spring. We see, there are times when people are more likely to cross than others. It's sometimes more difficult during some times of some points in winter. And the pandemic is starting to let up. You're seeing that, communities, countries, whatever it is, different locales are starting to open up more. So those are kind of three more sort of political factors that I think had to do with the way that people perceive being able to come at this time. But remember too, that even after zero tolerance and family separation, a couple of years ago in 2019, we saw a lot of people come as well. I mean, people, there are times when people come to the border for very real reasons.
And we should say, I think in 2019, at least as of like a week or two ago, the perception was that there was actually more people coming at that time. And I also just want to say, in terms of the coyotes, like you said, you can't, know what they're thinking. But as a pure sales proposition, if you're a coyote, the arguing Joe Biden's going to be easier than Donald Trump, however you want to phrase that, Joe Biden's more humane. There's going to be more opportunities for you there. That's a sales pitch that coyotes would have. So what should have the Biden administration done? And, we're 2 months into the Biden administration, maybe 65 days at this point, maybe a little less, into the Biden administration. What should they have done in anticipation for these numbers, which were obviously like reasonably anticipated?
Right. So the sort of trajectory for most kids who are asking for asylum once they reach the border is that they're temporarily put in a border facility. and then from there go into a different agency. It's called the Office of Refugee Resettlement. It's under the Department of Health and Human Services. And those are the shelters that we've heard a lot about. The administration is saying that, there is a large number of children coming, there aren't enough shelters, it's still a pandemic, there's still a public health crisis. And so for that reason, children are languishing at these border facilities for a lot longer. Those shelters exist. They've had grants for a really long time. They've had time to get ready. Biden thought that he might win, because otherwise, why would he have ever run? And then in November, he was elected. So at that time, in that kind of 2-month stretch, the administration could have done more in order to prepare these shelters to be ready and to take care of children in that kind of another middle step before they're reunified with a family member or a sponsor. And I think that that's what didn't happen. I think that's why we're seeing these sort of pop-up tent facilities. The most recent one that's, I believe, about to open is in San Diego, the San Diego Convention Center, I believe. So we're seeing, these big kind of warehouses, places that are more suited for maybe military barracks or sporting events than housing a lot of children. And again, when you have a lot of children together, especially kids who are often fleeing trauma, there's a lot of risk involved with that versus in smaller shelters, which come with their own risks. I don't want to minimize, some of the abuse and trauma that happens there. But it's different than being in this much bigger, huge tent place.
What is, so once they go to the ORR and places them in these shelters, what's the turnaround time? The idea is that they're going to be contacting the administrators at these shelters are going to be interviewing the kids. The kids say, my cousin lives here, my uncle lives here, my aunt lives here, my dad, my mom, my brother, my sister. And the ORR people try and connect. Is that basically the way the process works?
That's essentially how it works. There's a lot of kind of contracting and subcontracting, but there's a group of people who are tasked with reuniting a child with a sponsor. It generally isn't somebody that they were separated from at the border, but sometimes it is, because unless you are a child who is entering with your biological parent or a guardian as defined very strictly by that Border Patrol officer, you're going to be reunited a lot of times with someone who's already here. That may be your parent, that may be, as you said, a cousin. That time is indefinite. It's supposed to be quick. The rules are that you want to do a reunification as soon as possible. And you want to vet the sponsor and make sure that it's a suitable place, et cetera. But I know from my own reporting that there are children that spend an incredibly long amount of time. The last story that I investigated, this was a kid who was separated from her aunt and another cousin at the border when she was 10 years old. When Biden was vice president, actually, so this happened under Obama in 2013, she then spent 10 to 17 just going from shelter to shelter to shelter to shelter. She started to think that her family had abandoned her. They had not. I found that her family was right here in the United States, in North Carolina. However, before I was able to give her the message that was the case, she asked to be deported back to Honduras. So this child spent from age 10 to 17 just bouncing around shelters, is more well-traveled than most 10 to 17-year-olds that I know. I mean, she was from Washington to Massachusetts to Texas to New York, back to Texas, back to, she was sort of all over the place. And, during that time, it's remarkable that she did not learn English. She knows some English. I mean, I still am, in touch with her. She has some phrases. She knows yes or no. But she did not really learn English. And as someone who came here as a child, I mean, that's like the prime time when you learn English. It's a lot easier to learn a new language during that time. She didn't really learn how to read or write. She doesn't really have a full sense of the world. She was like in the United States, but pretty much always a captive to this agency, and now has been deported in the middle of a pandemic back to Honduras. So where she also didn't gain the skills. Think about all of the kind of social cues that you learn from 10 to 17. You don't learn those in a shelter. You're not even allowed a hug in a shelter, you know. So she's told me like she never got a hug for that entire time. So just imagine trying to, you know, then suddenly be an adult. She's about to be, you know, 18 at the end of the year. And that was her life. And so we see that it's rare, but some kids do spend a lot of time. We found that at least close to 1,000 kids have spent a year or longer in these shelters. And that's, again, it's just a really, really, really big part of your life. You know, a year now, think about the last year in this pandemic, a lot of us have, you know, not been able to leave the house. So think about just being locked up in a shelter, not having a hug, you know, having some form of education, but it's kind of this recycled program where you learn the ABCs, you know, 3, 4, 5 times in a year, and then it's just recycled over and over again. So, you know, for the most part, we see that a lot of kids are released to a sponsor in a reasonable amount of time. But then we do know that there's a sliver of kids that just stay in there indefinitely. They always get out when they're 18, then they go to adult detention.
That story is just so devastating. How does that happen? I mean, how like where was the breakdown in that situation? And just broadly speaking, is this just a question of ultimately like we just don't want to expend the resources, like that this could be done better, but we just don't. It's just not important enough for us as a country to expend the resources on this?
I do think that there is a will, there is a good intention. People that work within this agency and broadly within DHHS have social work backgrounds. They come in with very good intentions. They think of DHS as sort of the cops, the enforcers, and they're the sort of social workers, right? So I don't think that it's that necessarily, but I do think that there's a lot of ineptness that I've seen. And it can be just on the side of like 1 or 2 people that are tasked with really important things like reunifying a family, right? I've also seen, you know, anecdotally, more and more what we've seen in our reporting, in our investigations, is that kids come in, they're very excited to be here. They've finally made it here. You know, it usually is a pretty hard journey just to even get here. And they're pretty motivated that first like week or 2. You know, they're going to do their ABCs. They've got a bed. They feel, you know, relative safety. They may finally be in touch with a family member that they want to reunite with. The motivation to sort of be a good kid during that time really starts to turn. I would say anecdotally, again, between 2 and 4 weeks, kids start to feel like, wait a second, am I going to be stuck here? Because this is this sort of like, you know, it's this shelter, it's different, it's better, but like, is this going to be my life? And so the motivation to sort of be a good kid and be who you want to be to, you know, in order to be released for the government, you know, to your family really seems to decrease. And so like in the case of this girl that, whose story we investigated, you know, she really just had a breakdown. She had a pretty serious breakdown as she just had a really hard time. She was sent to a psychiatric treatment center in Florida. And it's around that time that the family, you know, kind of lost touch with her. That's when, and she doesn't remember all that well because then she also was drugged. Even though her family was here, they never had a say as to whether or not, you know, she could take those drugs. She is now totally off of those medications, but they were really heavy psychotropics. You know, she was on about 8 to 10 different psychotropics, and she, you know, she doesn't have access to them anymore. So that's the other thing too, is like we're deporting kids, and sometimes we've, you know, there is a certain treatment that they may have gotten, and then that supply is going to run out in a country where that, you know, mental health care is not the most pressing issue when you're not sure where you're going to sleep, for example.
So I'm just curious about a few things. One is really just how internalized racism, I guess, even if the people aren't cognizant of it, affects the treatment of these kids. Because if this was a little white blonde girl who spoke English, I doubt she would be shipped around and not listened to, and her I know we're running out of time a little bit, and her concerns not be dealt with. But then really just if you could just address that first.
Sure. I'll tell you this. Again, anecdotally, a lot of the stories that we've broken and that we've investigated, they just, it's almost a coincidence, except I think it's not, tend to be children who are Black and or Indigenous. I see it over and over and over again. Children who are not Black or Indigenous. I'm not saying all of those kids have an easy time, and I've talked to kids who have had a really, really hard time, who are not Black or Indigenous. That said, I do think, I mean, it's like such a good question because it's something that we see over and over and over again. We know about, the way that structural violence works. And I do think that, again, regardless of the intent, it's just going to be a lot easier to sort of forget that a child who may be Black, that the child in my story that I was just talking about, she is Black, right? And I have to think that informed, even in an unconscious way, the degree to which she was helped or not, because there were so many people that surrounded her as a person during this whole time. I mean, it takes a lot of people to keep this going. And none of those people made it so that she was ever released. She just, spent 10 to 17 in the United States, doesn't know English, doesn't know how to read or write, doesn't, is figuring out how to act in her society, but it's been really tough for her.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, I have a 15-year-old myself. I mean, just that period of time is just so huge in terms of developing a broad set of skills that you need to just navigate society, frankly. All right, let's just turn for a moment to the Vice President Harris has been deployed to deal with supposedly what's happening at the border, but also on a diplomatic mission to go to some of the countries in Central America and discuss this issue. Now, part of it is going to be stricter enforcement, which of course is just absurd because there's a reason why people are leaving these countries. Will you just speak to that? I mean, because this is, I think, the fundamental thing that Americans don't really perceive. It's not a question, like you can try and stop people from coming, but you cannot really, I mean, you really have to address the reasons why they are leaving where they live.
Right. It doesn't really matter how high you're going to build that wall. There will always be a reason to build a ladder that's taller. I think that it's not something that I write about too often, but I think that climate is something that really needs to be taken into account here. I know that sometimes people like to, kind of isolate it country by country. This is a region, right? So Central America as a region has been hit really hard by everything from hurricanes to erosion. A lot of these places are coffee growing areas, right? And we see the way that coffee rust is affecting crops, right? And so things that people relied on, ways of living, economics that people relied on are now being threatened. And there are sometimes easier ways to make money, like sticking somebody up, right? And so when that's not available, you may see a lot more violence because that's a much easier way to just, beat someone up and get some money. And so I think that the way that climate change is tied to violence as a reason for which people come here is an important one to consider, because the countries that people are fleeing are not the countries that also have the historical emissions that have created climate change, right? We all share an atmosphere. Places like, the global north, in this case, the United States in particular, have created those historical emissions that have essentially like poked holes in the atmosphere and making things more insecure for people, not just here, but in other countries who are not responsible for the causes of climate change, right? And so I know it might sound like really disconnected, but we are really all one planet, and this really is the only planet, and we have to share it. And so I think that climate change is a big one that I hope to sort of approach more in my reporting. It's always in the back of my mind. And there's a lot of political instability. Clinton, for example, I think about Hillary Clinton in particular, and the support for a coup that happened in Honduras, right? I think about the current president of El Salvador coming to the United States, Biden not meeting with him and him meeting with Tucker Carlson, right? I mean, there's sort of a lot of moving parts, and I'm happy to learn that that Vice President Harris is going to, take a more grounded approach with these countries. Again, I think there were probably some missed opportunities along the way, but I don't think it's anything that's going to be fixed overnight at all. I just don't. I don't see that happening. They aren't problems that you can fix overnight. Climate is not a problem you can fix overnight. And I do think that a lot of these things are tied together, and I don't know that they will be addressed quickly enough to sort of stop the reasons for which people, again, come to the United States.
Aura Bogado, senior reporter, producer for Reveal News. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Marcia Brown. Okay, joining the program now, Marcia Brown. She is a writing fellow at the American Prospect. Marcia, my understanding is you've just returned from the border and written a piece in the Prospect about Title 42. First off, just give us your take as to what you saw at the border.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. So I was down in Matamoros and Reynosa and in Brownsville a couple weeks ago. I was there for the last day of the Matamoros encampment, which was pretty well known. At one point, there were several thousand asylum seekers living there. When I was there were about 60 people left. And the people who were living there were in the Migrant Protection Protocol Remain in Mexico program, which is one of the policies that Biden has focused on dismantling and some of the policies that he's been rolling back. So he's been processing people with open MPP cases, which was the majority of people who were still in the camp. When I was there were about 60 people there who had more complicated cases, and they aren't actually part of the phase one processing, but because of the visibility, because of the leverage these asylum seekers had built in this camp, the Biden administration made an exception and they were processed later on. So so that's kind of what I saw when I was first down there.
So in other words, part of what you're saying is that, and people should just, the backstory to this is that the Trump administration instituted at least two policies that essentially created almost like a refugee community. I don't know what else to say about it at the border. And that is the Remain in Mexico policy, which was you need to like process your stuff in Mexico, regardless of where you're from. And the Title 42, which has very dubious legal authority, which essentially said the CDC, and I think from your piece I have gleaned that even people at the CDC didn't want to even issue this, but they were in many ways pressured, which basically said we're not going to let anybody in for fear of COVID, and which of course is pretty absurd because we have people crossing the border all the time right now. It's just, you're not any more likely to have COVID if you have documentation or you're just an asylum seeker than you are if you're, a tourist or traveling to buy some, whatever it is that you're buying on either side of the border. The Biden administration said, we're going to make an exception on Title 42 for children. Mm-hmm. Many of the people who are there with children basically said, cross the border now unaccompanied. So give us a sense of like how that's all playing and what people are saying about, why isn't Biden basically just getting rid of Title 42, period?
It's a great question, one that I have been asking a lot. Well, so absolutely, with respect to crossing the border, I crossed every day when I was down there, no problem. I didn't even have so much as a temperature check. And, you know, I mean, obviously asylum seekers who are being processed, who are in this Remain in Mexico program, they are getting COVID tests and they have a much lower positivity rate than the town of Brownsville, for example. There was some numbers that came out. But in terms of what's happening, I mean, for example, when I was there, the same day that the final few people who were in this camp left the camp, there was another group from Honduras that showed up, and they were hoping actually to be placed into MPP because they understood that to be a program that would get them into the United States. But of course, this was an awful program. And, you know, there's a growing camp actually in Tijuana of mostly Black asylum seekers from Haiti, and they have put up this camp, kind of like the Matamoros encampment, and it's raising a lot of visibility, and none of them are in MPP, and they have all been expelled under this Title 42 order, and the Biden administration has given no timeline for when, you know, they might have a chance to seek asylum, to be processed. I think what's really important to understand about Title 42 is that with the exception of unaccompanied children, like you said, and a few family units, particularly families with children under 7, there is no asylum at the border. There is currently no asylum. And that is, you know, that's definitely dubiously legal. It's pretty much illegal under international and legal law, as was American law. I mean, as was Remain in Mexico. I mean, both of these policies have been, you know, courts have said these are not legal policies. And I think right now, what a lot of people are saying about Title 42, and actually Jack Herrera did a great piece in Politico about this, is that there are some parents who arrive at the border with their children, and those children go across by themselves because they can be admitted, and the family units feel like they can't be. So that's another important factor to think about with Title 42, is how it's affecting families making these awful choices.
Two things I'd like you to address. One is, give us a sense of, well, first off, just will you please explain the law about asylum so that people understand this? Because there's this sort of just notion of like, you know, that I think just a misunderstanding about what our law and what international law is about asylum. And then I'd like to hear just sort of, what are these camps like? I mean, how dangerous are the camps themselves? You know, we know the dangers that are involved in the countries they're coming from, but let's talk about like the dangers that are, you know, associated with being in these refugee camps, for lack of a better term there.
Yeah, so I think what's important to understand about asylum, and again, asylum is very different from being a refugee, and that's actually what's so interesting about these camps and when they were down there, is that you have to be in U.S. territory to seek asylum. So you can't, you know, be abroad and say, I'd like to seek asylum. That would be, if you did that, you would be a refugee. So you have to cross the border, that's the other thing about people saying, oh, people are crossing illegally. Well, a lot of those people are asylum seekers, so they're doing nothing wrong. That is not illegal. It is very much legal to cross the border and seek asylum in the US. And that is legal, you know, that is both part of American law and part of international treaties that the US has signed and upheld for a long time. And I think what's also important to understand about that is there's this principle called non-refoulement, which is a French word, which just means that you can't send people back to where they would be in danger. And that's actually a big part of what, when people talk about Remain in Mexico, how that violated so many international principles of international law, is that you are sending asylum seekers, not just, you know, maybe they're Mexican asylum seekers, but they could be Guatemalan, they could be Honduran, and they're being sent back to a place where they're in danger. And, you know, when I was in Matamoros and I was in Reynosa, I spoke to people who had been kidnapped while they were in Mexico. One young man I spoke to, he was a year younger than me. He had experienced random gang violence in Guatemala, and he fled north to Mexico, and he thought he would have kind of a easy case for asylum, and he didn't, and he was stuck in this camp in Matamoros for almost 2 years. And while he was there, he was kidnapped, and his father, who lives in Maryland, you know, was extorted for several $1,000s, I believe. I mean, and this is a very normal experience for a lot of the people who are waiting in these camps. Several organizations have documented hundreds of incidents of extortion, kidnapping, rape, death, and you know, that's just recorded incidents. So they're very dangerous policies, both of them, and they're putting people in very serious danger.
And one of the other policies, I guess, that Biden announced via executive order at the start of his presidency was, I think, a lot less consequential than people realize about private prison contracts when it comes to detention of migrants. My understanding is that really just applies to the DOJ and not the ICE contracts. Can you talk about how that has kind of made things even, has not alleviated these conditions in the way that maybe it might on its face?
I'm actually unfamiliar with that, so I don't want to speak on that. But I can talk a little bit about how it is, ultimately with COVID and people trying to social distance, and the humanitarian crisis that Aura Bogado spoke so well about. Part of it is just you can't have as many people in the same facilities, and there are more children, and it is a humanitarian crisis, and people do need to be cared for humanely and decently.
Give us a sense of like what you saw could be. I mean, if you had the ability, what what would be the fix? I mean, again, I just wonder, is this a question of we as a society just are not deploying the resources necessary, or is there, an actual sort of like limitations to, to absorbing this many folks, particularly when there's been this sort of backlog and a deterioration? And you tell me if there's been a deterioration in the systems here. I mean, I don't think that they've worked the way that they should have for at least a year and probably longer. And you had, just organizations can degrade.
Absolutely. So I would definitely, when it comes to the systems, there's a lot of repair work that needs to be done. And the Biden administration has talked about this. I mean, they've used it really as an excuse, I think. But it is legitimate that there is a lot of repair that needs to be done. When it comes to Title 42, it actually seems to be contributing to the chaos that they're trying to not have. And I think what's important also to know about the sort of narrative of the crisis at the border is that 40% of people who are being apprehended, so those numbers that you're hearing, 100,000 people apprehended, 40% of those are people who have tried multiple times. So those numbers look really high. And it's also, there's seasonal migration, it's a new president, but many people started their journeys a long time ago. But in terms of, what is the solution? It's like end climate change. There are really deep root issues that people don't want to uproot their lives and have to come to a new country. If they could have a safe life for their family, they could put food on the table. And I think, I think the Biden administration has said that they are addressing that, but it's certainly not an easy fix. And then, on the other hand, the U.S. has room. The U.S. has room ultimately.
Well, that's what I meant. I'm saying, aside from, it's a separate issue in terms of the reasons why they're coming, but in terms of actually dealing with the absorption and the processes, I think Title 42, they thought was going to be, this is going to be we're going to let a little air out of the tires and that'll be easier. And we will have an orderly way of like having a flow of people that we can but it didn't, but they were wrong. They were wrong.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's definitely a backlog. It's partly Title 42. It's partly COVID. It's partly these policies like Remain in Mexico. There were 70,000 people in Remain in Mexico, and we don't know where a lot of them are because some of them are in Mexico, but not where they originally filed their cases. So it's just like, it is really complicated, and it is gonna take a lot to get it into an orderly system. But ultimately, especially with Border Patrol is kind of crying wolf. They have way more agents than they ever have had before, and they're saying that they can't manage normal seasonal migration. That's kind of just not true.
How much is what's going on with the Border Patrol? I know there was this like deal that was struck with the Border Patrol union in the last days of the Trump administration. How much is there, sabotage maybe is too strong of a word, but how much is there sort of like some misaligned, I guess, agendas between Border Patrol and the Biden administration?
Well, I mean, the Border Patrol Union endorsed Trump. I mean, they've favored Trump. The union's weekly podcast has had him on the podcast. The podcast is also sponsored by Breitbart. So, I mean, these are all just kind of things to know about the union, about Border Patrol agents. I think Jen Budd, who is a former Border Patrol agent and writes about this and talks about this a lot, she does use the word sabotage, and she does use that word. So, I mean, some people do see what Border Patrol is doing as trying to create this crisis narrative, and trying to make the sort of seasonal rise in numbers into something that is bigger than it is.
Marcia Brown, I think you were very diplomatic about that. I imagine you've got to maintain some relationships to do your reporting work, and so the piece is very helpful. Folks should check it out. The American Prospect. Appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me on.
Folks, that is all of our time today. We raced through that. There was a lot of information there. I feel like we could have done 2 shows.
I agree. There was so much that both guests we could have gotten to, but
more of that in the future. But the bottom line is we have 2 sort of sets of problems. One is we need to rectify a lot of the problems that, frankly, we created in Central America over the past 100 years, close to, in terms of destabilizing governments there, and also what we're contributing to climate change.
And the war on drugs.
And all of those policies. And then, of course, we have room for folks in this country, and we should just dedicate the resources to processing them and getting them, with their families. But we'll have more about that tomorrow. See you then. And we're still here. It is...
but not for long for Sam.
Not for long for me. It is Thursday, folks. We'll be moving into the fun half. Emma will be taking over. Joe Biden has his big press conference at 1:15 today,
yes,
apparently. And so, there you have it. I mean, that's... Thank goodness.
I know.
I mean, this is one of the things that... I think we'll end up talking about tomorrow is just sort of like I think like the Biden administration, some of this narrative has been helpful insofar as like it's getting the Biden administration, otherwise they've got a lot of things on their plate. It's not inconceivable to me to imagine that if there was not a greater focus on what's happening with those kids at the border, that you'd have many, many stories that would be, around like what Aura told us about the one girl who'd been stuck for 7 years. On the other hand, the nature of this so-called crisis is being misreported, it seems to me, in many ways. I mean, this is a crisis of us having a poor system in which to integrate and humanely treat people, rather than like some type of like mass caravan situation here. But we'll have more to talk about that. There is right now also in California, Echo Lake Park, a big standoff. There has been, maybe we'll get a chance to talk about this tomorrow in the so-called fun half. Particularly over COVID, there has been a community that is basically, LA has supposedly set aside money for, permanent housing. They're offering folks in that park just temporary housing, which is just not sufficient for people. And so it's created this big standoff, and we will talk about that tomorrow, but that seems to be ongoing right at the moment. I think they were given last night 24 hours to vacate the premise, but it's indicative of a larger problem that we have in this country. Yes. So, but Emma, I'm going to step off, and Brandon Sutton, I think, is going to be joining us. Is that right, yes. Brandon? Do we have him?
Both him and Binder will be joining now.
Okay, great. Well, in that case, I will say first, check out No McKee Show at youtube.com/The No McKee Show. I'm not sure who she has on today, Haven't gotten my text about that, but 3 p.m. Check that out. Also, while we're waiting for Matt and Brandon to pop up, old Matt, why don't you tell us what's happening in Matt?
Well, I was new Matt, but maybe the last name.
New Matt. I'm sorry, new Matt. What's happening in media universe?
Tonight, Shama Sawant talking to us about the recall and how to actually do socialism and take power. So check that out. Good interview with her. And then we have Waz on trade deadline day. We're going to be talking about getting a team back in Seattle, the NBA Players Association, and the 1964 All-Star Game strike threat, and why Luka keeps cooking Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. So check that out tonight. Left Reckoning YouTube page, patreon.com/Left Reckoning to get the post game.
That'll be fun.
And old Matt is here. Sorry, new Matt. I didn't mean to temporarily insult you. Old Matt is here. Old Matt, what's happening on Doomed?
You're muted.
Ooh, he's not muted, but his audio isn't coming through.
Oh.
How about now?
There we go.
Wow, quick.
Well, hello, everybody. Perfect. Okay. Well, first I wanted to say I saw that beautiful 1 million subscriber plaque. That was just fantastic.
Yeah, can you believe they put David Pakman's name all over it?
Yeah, I know. And they misspelled his name. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean,
it was an insult to you both.
Yeah, we both.
Well, tonight on Doomed at youtube.com/Matt Binder, live at 9 p.m. Eastern time, I will be talking with the founder of the Center for Countering Digital Hate about a new report they put out, which basically found that 65% of all the anti-vaccine conspiracy theories and misinformation over these past few months have come from just 12 individuals. So we'll be diving into who those 12 people are. Oh. Yeah, it's crazy. And we'll be diving into who those 12 people are.
They must have no kids if they can, if 12 people can produce all of that content.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot. Well, one of them is a multi-million-dollar dietary supplement hawker who's big in the alternative medicine world. Okay. Joseph Mercola. He $100 million business selling this stuff on his website. Right. So yeah, it'll be an interesting show tonight. youtube.com/Matt Binder.
And,
Eastern time.
And do we have Brandon?
I think he might be trying to get.
Okay. Well,
you know, I'm here audio wise, but my video is having a bit of a trouble. Wait, let's see if I got it.
It's very interesting. There we go.
Hello.
We're getting a weird.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Brandon Sutton, welcome to the program. You're going to be joining these guys in the fun half. What's happening on the discourse?
Actually, I'm going to go record that right after I'm done here. So, you know, basically whatever I don't get through here, I'm going to continue on my show. So look forward to, you know, the same topics, but a little bit more vulgar.
A little bit? Well, in the fun half, maybe we can get a little bit vulgar. I don't know how you feel about that,
I would like to step off before things start getting vulgar around here.
I don't want to implicate Sam.
Don't forget, it's your support that makes the show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you get the free show free of commercials, and you get access to the fun half, and you support the free show. And so just
like the stream.
Like the stream. Do it. All right, guys, have a good time in the fun half. Have fun. In the fun half, I won't listen. So if you really want to get vulgar, I mean, I understand.
Or make fun of you for cutting your own hair.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if that's going to show up, but we'll see. All right, folks. See you. These guys will see you later. I'll see you tomorrow. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous. You're a little bit upset. You're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance. Rand Paul. I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Hello.
I can hear you.
What's,
Can you hear me?
Look at that.
What's with all the plaid on the show today?
Nice job, Bender.
I didn't even realize we are all dressed the same.
Well,
I
I'm a
wasn't
hipster.
just 2 minutes
so-
ago.
You guys must have seen me in the first half and then decided to all wear red flannels as well.
Well, I know I did actually. That's legitimately what happened. I was not wearing this.
This is becoming a real issue on the show.
I have actually never watched the Majority Report before, so I can't claim to be stealing anyone's thunder.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
That's unfortunate, Brandon, because
Oh my gosh.
Oh my god, no way.
This is a blanket, but you know.
Yeah,
Are we gonna do like a lumberjack shanty, like like the TikTok kids are doing, or is that not? Are we too old for that?
Can you teach us one? I don't know any lumberjack shanties off the top of my head.
I
I'm
feel
a
like-
lumberjack and I'm okay because that one is that not lumberjack
That
shanty?
started. Yeah, I liked how that
Just
started.
go for it. Go for it.
I don't know the rest of the words to that one. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have been so pretentious.
I mean, we're all
I'm
we're all
stealing
here
lumberjack
waiting.
valor.
We're all here waiting on Brendan now to show up in his plaid. What's going on, buddy?
I just traveled and I have limited clothing supply with me, but
Sure.
He's plaid in spirit.
It's not okay to steal lumberjack valor because lumberjacks
a lot.
actually have a dangerous job.
Thanks a lot, Brendan, for killing it. Now I'm not going to wear it anymore. Geez, just ruin it. Now we're not all wearing it. Unbelievable. But hey guys, how you doing? Enough plaid talk. You all doing good today?
I'm doing well. I mean, I feel kind of awkward. Everyone changed when I came on, but that's fine.
You're a trendsetter. That's
Or a
how it
trendender.
works. No, because
Yeah, actually, that.
No,
he
see,
is.
Emma
Okay, I
wearing
see.
the plaid. Emma wearing the plaid is just one person wearing plaid. But then you come on, and Brandon's wearing the plaid, and it's like, oh, there's a trend now.
I was the trend ender, actually.
Yeah, that's true. Because you were wearing a blanket. Who wears a blanket? Come on.
I mean, that's all I had in this pattern.
It appeals to me that we're explaining trends using like plaid, a pattern. I find, that just tickles my funny bone. But please, how are you doing, Matt? Other Matt, first Matt.
I'm doing me. I guess I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing pretty good. We got a show for everyone today, don't we?
Not everyone, not quite everyone.
Oh, today
it's a little bit exclusive.
I got into a little bit of a tiff earlier today on Twitter with Michael Tracy, and
Fan of the show, Michael Tracy.
Oh yeah, friend of the show.
Yeah, because you've all heard that that really good digital outlet, Mel Magazine. They do they did some really good, interesting work, stuff you haven't seen anywhere else. I know my guest on Doomed last week, David Bixenspan, he wrote that article about Lauren Boebert having a connection to pro wrestler Stan Lane, that connection being he is her father, allegedly, for Mel. And, Mel was funded by Dollar Shave Club, apparently, which I guess not a good idea because they pulled their funding after many years of funding that outlet. And
frankly, shocking that to be honest, I hadn't heard of Mel, and I definitely didn't know about that financial relationship, which seems extremely generous from basically a podcast, a company that advertises on podcasts.
I agree.
Right.
Completely.
They funded an entire outlet. I mean, where are those other companies who'd like to do that? I would like to pitch you. I mean, I would take that funding for a couple of years happily. But, Michael Tracy went on their website today after they shut down. The site is still live, but they're not putting anything new up. And he noticed that the top story was about toxic masculinity. And so he took a screenshot of the website and shared it to his Twitter followers with all these stories about masculinity. And he was like, is there any wonder why this outlet would fail when they're writing this sort of stuff to appeal to the user base for Dollar Shave Club? And he portrayed it in a way that looked like all Mel Magazine wrote about was toxic masculinity, because he did not tell his followers that he clicked on their tag, which was masculinity, which then shows all the articles they ever wrote about masculinity. And I was like, well, that's kind of messed up for you to do that and portray something in a light that's not accurate. They probably, just like most digital media outlets, were not profitable to the company anymore. And, he started to argue with me about it. And someone pointed out how, buddy, if you look at the actual main page, only 3 of the articles out of the 35 articles on their main page were tagged with the masculinity tag anyway. So he was making a big to-do and hubbub for his followers about nothing. They all ate it up because they're all Pepe Nazis, Michael Tracy's followers.
I don't really keep up with Twitter stuff anymore because it's, it kind of overwhelms me. A lot of scrolling words and text. But I will say, the media industry, especially the digital media industry, new digital magazines, they've been in trouble for a long time preceding the pandemic. Who knows what the pandemic has done to their sort of, ad revenue or subscriptions or clicks. And, previous to, I guess, the analysis that the reason they're not doing well is because the content is shoddy or whatever, people were more involved and engaged in a sort of, analysis of well, yeah, but a lot of their ad revenue is being stolen by Facebook. It's being stolen by Google. It's being, content's being stolen by other larger outlets, which, doesn't drive clicks towards their website. A large number of other issues affecting not just digital media, but the entirety of sort of the capitalist system. And so, perhaps the content is the issue. A lot of magazines go under because of the content, but I think, honing in on that is probably missing a larger story about the way in which capital has just basically extracted all of the wealth out of the digital media industry. And now there's just a handful of, big corporations who can afford to buy up a conglomerate, these websites and either close them or do huge layoffs like HuffPost and BuzzFeed, et cetera, et cetera. So, I guess I'm open to the idea that it's content, but much more likely it's the idea that we have this glut of digital media outlets, and they're all either being, uh, having their revenue sucked out by billionaires or millionaires, or they're being, essentially kept afloat as the prestige outlet of a handful of other billionaires and millionaires, like the New Yorker or something like that. So, how viable the entire media industry is at this point, going from, I've never heard of Mel Magazine either, I'm sorry, but like what you're talking about, Mel Magazine or the New Yorker or the New York Times as like an actual money earning sort of revenue generating industry is debatable.
Right. And one thing that really stood out to me with Tracy's whole spiel about it was this is happening just amid this. He said this just amid this whole debate online about Substack, where the Taibbi and Greenwald and Tracy are coming out and saying, Substack allows independent writers to break the chains from the corporate media stranglehold and write what they want to write about. And here's Tracy arguing, well, if you don't write for your audience and keep them happy, then you're going to go under. I mean, so is Michael Tracy admitting that his Substack will not challenge his audience? Because if he does that, he might worry that his subscribers will be bothered by that challenge, by reading something that might cause them to think outside their bubble. And then they might leave him and he won't make that sweet Substack subscription money anymore. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I know on this show, and Sam has done this before, I've seen him do it. If someone complains about the content and they dangle their subscription in front of Sam with like, if you're not gonna cover this stuff, or if you continue to cover this stuff, I will pull my subscription. I've seen Sam fire subscribers say, I'm not beholden to you guys. I cover what I want to cover. But Tracy is arguing the opposite. If you don't cover the way that your subscribers want you to cover, then this is what happens.
It's a huge problem. I mean, with lefty media, I think, and again, huge relative to like just the occupation that we're in, right? I'm not saying this is like a colossal issue on a grand scale, but just the incentive structure, it's becoming a little insane for even people, I think, who have good like lefty moral compasses and principles. It's difficult not to respond to those incentives if you don't have kind of a diverse way of making money, and you don't have anything except kind of appealing to certain people. I mean, there were like people in this space who I really appreciate who shied away from, for example, the Tulsi Gabbard conversation when everybody knew she was a grifter, just out of fear of her rabid fan base, or etc. I even think Andrew Yang critique is not discussed enough in some of these spaces in order to kind of appeal to those niche fan bases who will spam you otherwise or may go somewhere else. So those were just some examples. That was really more from the presidential race, but we're still seeing it today.
Right. I think no, go ahead, Brent.
I was going to say, I think, I'm not super familiar with the particulars of the argument, but I think to your point, Matt, you raise a good sort of, I would like to parallel that, because if that's the case, if this publication, if Dollar Shave Club, if the readers, let's say, decided to shut the place down because the opinions, they didn't like them, is that not the same thing as canceling? Is that not like the whole cancel culture question has been about for like I don't believe in those sorts of things, but like, is that not the same thing? Is people deciding that because of the content of the magazine, they no longer want to support it? Which, I think is a completely fair and practical thing sometimes. That's often presented as an ideological question. Like, should people be forced to subscribe and pay and like support things that they just don't like or actively demonize them? Of course, you can't make people do that, whether or not it's, I guess, akin to your ideology or not. But it seems as though we have decided there's a blind spot for people who hold the levers of being able to pay your bills, obviously, where it's not canceling if your job fires you, it's just firing, if in this case, the ideology is not popular amongst the people who claim that canceling is a big deal. I guess it's not the same thing,
Right. Yeah. I mean, personally, I can't think of any like, anyone on the left, like going off the Substack debate, anyone on the left in beyond cultural left, who gets these sorts of deals, because I guess they don't partake in what you were talking about, this whole like outrage stuff. Like they're the ones who get all the attention.
I missed what you were talking about, Binder, earlier. There's some sort of deal happening. It's okay. Yeah, I
All
have
right,
to take my break really quick, but
the short of it is that Tracy was claiming Mel magazine went under because all they wrote about was masculinity.
Oh.
And what it turns out is that he had to click the masculinity tag on Mel magazine, which only showed him the masculinity articles.
Okay. Okay. Now I get the full picture. All right. That's beautiful. That's amazing.
I mean, to be generous, I have not read Mel magazine, so I can't make any comments on their particular content. But I, in a vacuum, would be willing to concede that a lot of the coverage of issues related to like what we would generally call identity politics that takes place in modern, mainstream outlets is bad. It's not very good. It's very shallow because it appeals to a very specific subset of the population. And so it becomes hard to kind of defend the nuances of it other than for like on a very, very shallow, like, well, people should be writing about issues of race and gender and, other forms of like non-class issues in publications. It's just the people we have writing about them sometimes, put a veneer of liberalism or pro-capital tendencies in them that make them almost completely alien to people on the left and also the lives of most people who are struggling. And so it's a kind of balance you have to strike, but at the same time, coverage of basically every issue is affected by the same thing. So it's not as though like race or identity is being affected in some anomalous way from, let's say, hobby journalism or any other kind of journalism. It's just that some people only can identify it when it's, not about them.
Right. And in other news, I saw today that, on the, I guess the more corporate media side, Michael Tomasky of the Daily Beast. I don't know if you guys recall that name, but he wrote pretty much an anti-Bernie article every single week during the, I don't know about the 2020 primaries, but definitely during the 2016 primaries. New Republic just hired him as their top editor. So it's all bad all around, no matter if you're independent or, enough, I guess, with the insidery media stuff.
Yeah. You guys want to get to, we can take some calls. You want to get to some clips?
Yeah, let's, you got a clip in mind? Otherwise I could grab a call.
How about you grab a call and then I'll look at some clips.
Perfect. 408. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Weather in Atlanta.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
Good. What would you like to talk about today?
Hi. Well, I was originally going to call about this like Ever Given ship blocking the Suez Canal and how it's like a great demonstration of like the power of labor. But honestly, the guest talking about that girl who was like stuck in a cage for 7 years set me off about something, because she mentioned that this girl was like put on like heavy psychotropic drugs, and it's like such a good demonstration of how our mental health care system individualizes societal problems and pathologizes individual problems. Like if you lock someone in a cage, and it doesn't matter whether it's a literal prison or a shelter or an abusive home environment or just a job that like bleeds out all your energy and time. If you're in that situation, it's completely natural to have a breakdown or use drugs or whatever else. But like even the best psychiatrists and therapists can't do anything about your life situation. Their job is to like shape you into a square peg that can fit into your like proper square hole in a system that's just hostile to humanity. And if you have a hard time with that, that's a pathology, and they can diagnose it. And in some situations, they can force you to take drugs that just like clobber your entire personality out of you. It's not like they were doing that for the girl's benefit. If anyone cared about her benefit, she would not have been kept from her family like that for 7 years. It was to make her a better subject of the violence that the system demands to be inflicted on her. So that's what I have to say about that.
Appreciate the call. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's well said. All right, let's get to this Jen Psaki clip because I find it pretty fascinating.
All right, let's do it. I didn't hear that first. I missed the interview earlier, so I didn't. But what the caller said was great. So go ahead, Emma.
Yeah. So Jen Psaki, the White House spokesperson for Joe Biden, is on the defense after the Biden administration decided to fire officials for the awful crime of having smoked weed. I mean, they shouldn't have admitted it, honestly, but still, they probably thought, this is a Democratic president. He's not going to fire me for smoking weed. Unfortunately, Joe Biden was, I think, the only candidate in the 2020 Democratic primary who did not support the federal legalization of marijuana. And this is what comes from that backwards position.
Sure. So Vice President Kamala Harris says that she is a past marijuana smoker. She said, quote, "It gives people joy, and we need more joy in this world." She is with a clear majority of the U.S. population in supporting marijuana legalization. According to polls, 2/3 of people do, including about half of Republicans. Yet last week, the Daily Beast reported that there were dozens of White House staffers who were either disciplined or terminated from their jobs for past marijuana use. You seem to confirm 5 terminations on Twitter. And my question is, why would President Biden allow this to happen, especially considering the White House staff were led to believe that pot use would not be disqualifying, and especially considering the Vice President is herself a former marijuana user?
Well, let me first say that what we tried to do as an administration was work with the security service, who actually makes these determinations about suitability for serving in government. In the past, and I served in the Obama-Biden administration, the rules were actually far more stringent. So that isn't about anyone's personal point of view. It's about working through the process, the history, and modernizing it and taking steps to address the fact that marijuana is legal in a number of states across the country. It is still illegal federally, right? We know that. There were, as I noted, I think in our comment last week, 5 individuals who are no longer employed at the White House. A number of them, there were other security issues that were raised. And that's an unfortunate conclusion, of course. But what we tried to do is enable additional members of the team who would not have been able to continue serving in past administrations to continue serving by updating our policy in coordination with the security service.
Follow up on that. Surely President Biden could, implement changes here unilaterally and just say that these people can come to work for him.
Well, I think if marijuana was federally legal, that might be a different circumstance. But I don't think I have any more for this on this for you. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have any real explanation for it, given that, if this is your position on the issue, Harris is out of there. Obama shouldn't have been able to be president, given the exact standards that you let out. And don't tell me that old Joey hasn't taken a toke here or there, right? Although, I don't know, maybe he's that old school. I don't believe it. I just would imagine that everybody has tried smoking weed at one point in their life. But yeah, this is an absolutely absurd position of theirs. They stepped in it themselves, and they didn't have to do this. They're doing it for their commitment to bureaucracy, and once again, hiding behind procedure, hiding behind obtuse statutes and language about respectability. This is going to be the blueprint for the Biden administration to excuse their actions going forward.
I am wondering though, like you said, almost everybody, I have to say, myself not included, but almost everybody has smoked weed in their life. So I'm wondering, what was the criteria that those 5 people who got fired hit that got them fired? I mean, I can't even imagine.
Ongoing regular use was my guess, but
Yes,
I don't know.
They probably had to say that they are currently smoking marijuana, which
I gotta say that there's got to be
it's legal in DC.
way more than 5. It's legal in DC, and they could be using it for medicinal purposes, but that doesn't prevent you from getting fired by the Biden administration. They didn't have to do it because no one would care. As was listed by that reporter, 2/3 of Americans at minimum want legalization across the board. The medicinal use, that's an even higher number. Why do this? Why create this problem for yourself, except for this bizarre religious commitment to kind of, I don't know, letter of the law when it comes to drug use, and still continuing to demonize that? Is that as easy as it is?
Well, I mean, I'll say as the, perhaps the soberest person in the world, that, Joe Biden, I would see a fellow kindred spirit, somebody who knows the dangers of jazz cigarettes that they play on, tempting white women into the dangers of smoke-filled rooms with Negro males. And, at the end of the day, he's just trying to keep America safe. On the other hand, I would say this is just a classic, noob trap, to borrow a gamer term that's not, that also starts with an N word, in the sense that, if you admit to doing drugs to the president who out of all of the nominees was the most hard on drug use, then you kind of deserve what you get.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, I can't defend people who think that they should be exceptions to rules that everyone else should be subjugated to. Like, and the idea that they, you know, I don't know what's in their heart. I don't know anything about these staffers, to be perfectly honest. They could be like ex-Trump staffers who still work in the White House across administrations for all I know. And so, you know, at the end of the day, like if they are, you know, that dedicated to smoking weed, they should get into Joe Biden's ear, the ones that still work there, I guess, and try to change his mind. But they should do so while, you know, sober, I suppose, like me.
Yeah, I think point taken. The point really is just this illustrates to me just like the arcaneness of the Biden administration and their continued desire to, even if he's being bolder on legislation than was initially anticipated, the almost nostalgia and desire to do politics like it existed in the 90s, it still remains in the Biden White House.
Well,
I mean, I'm sure
that's. Go ahead, Brandon.
I was going to say, I'm sure he's showing the staffers reefer madness as we speak. It's, you know, it's just the kind of person Joe Biden is. It's like it's his personality. I think that, you know, Kamala Harris, she's right on this one. You got to give it to her. But Joe Biden has been, you know, pretty clear about his feelings personally on marijuana and marijuana legalization throughout the primary. People who are confused about that, you know, on a personal level, maybe thought that they'd be an exemption, but I mean, it's Joe Biden. Joe Biden, you know Joe Biden. We all know Joe Biden.
Right.
Yeah, come on, man.
Come on, Jack.
I mean, Emma, you shared out that story the other day about how Biden's all really enamored with the fact that people are saying that he's moving faster than Obama, and he's going to be
he's bigger
like,
and bolder, and maybe
bigger,
even cooler and younger than Obama. Many people are
maybe
saying
even
this,
like
many
thicker set of hair than Obama.
Right? I heard
better jump shot.
Heard he's got a big.
Heard he's good, better at basketball, more, yeah, and
But
I heard
maybe
he's better friends with Beyonce. I don't know.
Maybe we need like, you know, some, I don't know what Joe Biden considers hit. Maybe we need like some like Arthur Fonzarelli types walking around the White House smoking weed, saying like, oh man, I wish Cool Joe would make this legal. And then maybe he'll be like, Obama would never do this, you know?
Right, exactly. We just have to keep saying like Obama would never pass Medicare for all, Joe. And
because
if you
of
do
Joe,
so, you're going to put 30 years onto your life and be friends with all of Obama's celebrity friends.
Because of Joe Biden's just like raw sort of charisma, kind of like Joe Camel, the old like smoking mascot, not marijuana cigarettes, the normal kind, which I presume he's okay with smoking. You know, a lot of people are starting to call Obama the white Joe Biden. And that's really, you know, I think the angle that everyone's going to be aiming for, trying to get into his ear.
Many people are saying
very
it,
Trump-like in
Brandon.
that, though.
Many people
Very
are
Trump-like
saying
in that, like, you know, that kind of weird ego flexing.
It's like
really focused on
politicians,
Obama.
though. That's just politicians. They're ego-driven creatures for the most part, you know?
Definitely. And Obama is a uniquely good politician. And, you know, you can, if you abstract all the bad things he's done and like, hey, you know, good orator, very charismatic, really ensorcelled the population. Like you can see why a lot of people would aspire to that. That was the whole thing during the primary. Everyone was going to be like the blank Joe, the blank Obama. Like Kamala Harris was the female Obama. I guess who else was in that primary? It seems like forever ago.
Buttigieg was South Bend Obama.
Yeah, Delaney was ripped Obama, and you know, Yang was I guess tech billionaire Obama. Everything, you know, it was all just trying to recapture that magic.
I don't know if this, Yang does not have an ounce of charisma, I gotta be honest with you.
Yang has the kind of manufactured charisma that you get at TED Talk. Like the kind of, you know, he walks on stage, he has an anecdote about his own family. He that, you know, is supposed to relate to your family, but he doesn't really say anything. He's stalking the streets of New York City as we speak right now. You never know where you're going to run into Andrew Yang.
Well, you know, you'll find him in a bodega. That's where he goes every single morning.
You'll find him in a Target. You'll find him in a Target pretending like it's no bodega. really tapping.
Yeah.
He's just like really tapping into that like sort of like just moved to New York demographic, like just discovered bodega, just discovered egg and cheeses, like are constantly tweeting about it back to like their loser friends, you know, no offense, in like the one horse town they're from. And but get to me when you know about Kennedy Fried Chicken. When you're like, you know, stumbling into Kennedy Fried Chicken at 2:00 in the morning for some mozzarella sticks, then you live in Brooklyn.
I mean, he's tweeting like pro Nets stuff, so I don't really know.
I don't know. I will say that
Not real New Yorker.
the Yang is traveling all over, and I will say that from seeing it myself among people who get visited by the candidates, whatever kind of race it is, that shit really works. Like the other mayoral candidates, for the sake of everyone who doesn't want Yang, they got to start knocking on doors and getting out there. I haven't seen anything like that, what Yang is doing. I mean,
he's the only one I've heard of so far. You know, he's the only one I see just out there.
That's all you got to do to win over votes, to be quite frank with most people. Unfortunately, people really take that to heart. Like, oh, but he visited me. How could I not vote for him when I go to the voting booth?
Gonna win, I think. Well, at least that's what people are saying. I can't.
I don't know. I think it's way too early. I don't know if you guys remember, but when De Blasio wasn't mayor, not 2 election cycles ago, De Blasio was nowhere near first. Christine Quinn was the sure thing, being Bloomberg's protege, and then there was a whole bunch of other candidates who were vying for second. De Blasio was honestly not even on the radar. And then he just out of the blue started like hitting up all these different protests. He put himself on the line to try to stop the closure of physically.
Anthony
try to stop
Weiner was the front runner at that.
Right. He was. Yeah. And, he did a bunch of things that really got him press. And all of a sudden he shot to the top, like towards the last couple of months. It wasn't like he was leading the pack ever before that. So it's still wide open, I think.
Diane Morales is the candidate people are suggesting to me. Diane, at Diane with 2 N's for NYC. So I don't know if there's a better one, but she seems good.
So hopefully once the pool is narrowed, people can, find a more progressive candidate than Yang.
I mean, I think America's a lot dumber than it was back then when people decided on de Blasio, I suppose. So maybe America, New York City rather, is ready for just a literal snake oil salesman, maybe just to be its leader.
De Blasio was actually good back then. At least he presented himself really well. Like a lot of really good progressive groups got behind him, and he was seen as legit for a while. And then
he was running
we all know what happened there.
No stop and frisk, all of those things, really actual police reform. And then he got a swirly by the police union basically in the toilet and got bullied by them and now, cowed to them.
Right. I mean, listen, de Blasio is bad, but I always feel like, at least in New York City, people throw shit that's Cuomo's. There really is their issue with Cuomo on de Blasio. Like, that doesn't absolve de Blasio. De Blasio is bad in his own right. But he also is not responsible for a lot of the things that people who aren't really that involved with politics in New York City blame him for. That buck stops with Cuomo. And I mean, I don't know if you guys want to talk about, I don't know if you guys already talked about it, that latest Cuomo story where he was sending tests out for in-home testing in the early days of the pandemic in New York City to his family members, including his CNN anchor brother, Chris Cuomo.
Friends and family. Yeah, we talked about it a little bit in the first hour, but it just keeps rolling out all of these controversies with him. I mean,
the grossest thing is, I don't know if you guys have seen this online. They're defending even that. Like, all I see in the mentions of the reporters who are sharing these articles are oh, so what? Like, you would have done the same? Oh, like, that's so bad. What about Trump's family? What about with DeSantis and Florida? Yeah, we covered all that. It's been all covered. Now it's getting to your guy and you're absolving him of it. You're doing whataboutism. It's ridiculous. Did people forget how rare tests were in March, April, May in New York City? Like, to get a test then was like you hit the lottery. Like, it was.
I couldn't get tested. I had COVID back then and I couldn't get tested. Like, last March, I had COVID-19. They were like, well, you sound like you have it, but just stay home because, there are just not that many tests.
Right, yeah, it was like with the vaccine, sort of like it was luxury people. If you had the hookup, you could get a test, basically.
Yeah, they were saying if you think you have COVID, don't get a test. That was like the insanity of it.
Well, I mean, Cuomo's sexuality is still gripping the Democratic Party. And I think the meanest thing you can say about them is that sometimes the criticism of the Republicans, of the Democrats, is largely true, that they don't have a problem with a lot of these underlying corruptions or, self-dealings or, even just interpersonal racisms or sexisms or stuff like that. They just don't like when the Republicans do it, because they're willing to at least hand wave it away, if nothing else, when their own people do it. Well, and whether or not that's a function. Yeah, it's partisan hackery. And whether it's a function of them believing that Republicans do it first, allow them, or puts them in a corner where they can't afford to be so choosy, or they just relish the opportunity to do bad things, it kind of just ends up being the same thing to the outside viewer. Like, it's hypocrisy versus hypocrisy.
Right. Right. And I just can't believe the idea that it's one thing. It's like the double dipping of the scandals here, especially within this one scandal. Like, not only did he make sure his family, including his brother who works for CNN, got these tests, but they were home delivered and home administered. Like, they traveled out to some rich neighborhood in Long Island for Chris Cuomo. Like, are you kidding me? Like, it's just, oh my God, it just, never ends.
Where did it say he is on Long Island? Now I'm curious, because I know where Sean Hannity is on Long Island.
Let me see if I could figure this out really quick. Chris Cuomo, where is it? I don't see it.
This is not necessary. I'll look it up.
No,
wasn't Chris Cuomo also in the news earlier this week, or maybe last week, I suppose, saying that he hasn't benefited from some sort of political insiders club or some sort of political dynasty, as during his career, like other people? I forget what the context of that was, but he was saying that out loud, and people were rightfully pointing out, but as the son of Mario Cuomo, you were basically hand delivered so many different opportunities to basically be AG on a.
I think you were thinking of, when Andrew Cuomo was defending himself to those reporters.
He said he was a political outsider.
A political outsider, yes.
Yes.
And I mean, he's been allowed to more or less escape the sort of dynastic questions, or rather like the red flag of the dynastic elements of his own ascendant to power before. And it's just like, but this is the kind of thing that they've always been engaged in: self-dealing amongst their own family, favoritism, nepotism, et cetera, et cetera. It's just a lot of it, and the results of that kind of corruption are just coming out, to a lot of people. And we're seeing the defense of it become very, reminiscent of the way they defended Trump, the way they defended Biden, the way they'll defend, who knows what the next abuse will be.
To talk about self-dealing, he named a bridge after his dad.
Right. Well, that's even like small bore. Like, there was a project a couple of years back to inject money into the economy in Buffalo. It was called Buffalo Billions, and everyone who got this big deal were Cuomo allies. And it turned out that there was a bidding scheme going on between those people, and they all got charged for it, hit with charges over it, because that's illegal. And Cuomo, who again worked it out so his buddies all got this deal to begin with, said, I had no idea anything inappropriate was going on. And he got away with it. He got away. He didn't get charged. He didn't get in trouble. And it's just constant backroom dealing, whatever it's called. It's just
him and Chris Christie are very similar. Like the fact that him and Chris Christie aren't put in the same conversation as being the exact same kind of corrupt, if not Andrew Cuomo being more corrupt in some ways than Chris Christie, if not leading to the death of a bunch of people during that bridge closing incident. But in terms of just like general corruption, they are very similar.
Right. And to your point that you said before, it's even worse, because at least most people will say, yeah, Chris Christie is an asshole. Whereas the opposite, most people will probably say, oh, that Cuomo, he's a good guy. You got to give him a pass on this one. Oh, yeah, give him a pass on that one. Don't forget what he did for this state during COVID. Like, it's just unbelievable. Yeah, what he did for this state too. It's send how many elderly people to their death in nursing homes. I mean, it's unbelievable what this guy's
also
getting away
the slave labor in prisons to make hand sanitizer.
Right. You guys, this is also small board, but do you guys remember that really ugly poster he put out, that art he had commissioned?
That big hill? Yeah.
If one of you guys could pull this up. I know everyone just pointed out how ugly it was, but playing by even Cuomo's rules of, we're supposed to capture what the state of New York was going through at this time. There's a part in the poster where you have service workers, medical workers, nurses, doctors, like tugging on a rope or something, like pulling New York State out of the mess, and tugging on the rope with them. He had his 3 daughters inserted right with all the nurses and service workers. What the hell did they do? What did they do? They were fodder for their dad's jokes about having spaghetti dinners with the boyfriend. I mean, are you kidding me? What? There's the picture. What did his 3 daughters do, along with the healthcare workers, the essential workers, the out-of-state volunteers? Are you kidding me? What is this
Yeah, it
shit?
was weird. He kept putting them in the press conferences too. And even, my mom, who's like kind of true blue Democrat, was like, it's a little weird that his daughters are involved in this. I'm like, yeah, it is a little
Boyfriend
weird.
Cliff too.
Yeah, it was just like,
It's like such twee bullshit.
Is that a Cliff Wife reference? Because that was great. I remember Cliff Wife.
No, it's because he during the early days of the pandemic, he joked how one of his daughter's boyfriends was staying with them because of all of it or something like that, and how he constantly was like giving him shit or something like that.
I mean, it has the kind
what,
of like
that's what weird creepy dads do, give their girlfriend, their daughter's boyfriend shit. That's not at all weird and creepy, right?
it has that kind of like highlights magazine vibe that Ben Garrison comics have too, where everything is over labeled but still confusing.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, let's get to this Ted Cruz clip because I'd be down to talk about this because this For the People Act fight's going to be huge. Ted Cruz spoke to the press after a Rules Committee hearing. I believe this was yesterday, and he lies so easily that it's not borderline sociopathic. It basically is. Don't mean to misdiagnose you, Ted Cruz, but I think it's pretty clear. Let's take a listen to what he has to say about HR 1 and S1.
I just came from the Rules Committee hearing on the Corrupt Politicians Act. This is the most dangerous legislation that's ever been considered by the Rules Committee. It is in the House HR 1, it is in the Senate S1. That means it's the very first bill that was submitted by Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats, the very first bill that was submitted by Chuck Schumer and the Democrats. It is their number one priority. Pause for a minute and reflect that the top priority of the Democrats is not COVID-19. It's not immunizations. It's not getting people back to work. It's not reopening schools and getting millions of kids back in the classroom. It is locking in power for the Democrats for the next 100 years. That is their overarching priority. How does it do this?
With voting.
The Corrupt Politicians Act mandates automatic voter registration whenever anyone has an interaction with the government, whether they have an interaction getting a welfare check, an unemployment check, whether they have a driver's license from the DMV.
Okay.
Heaven forbid.
Whether they attend a public university, everyone is registered. This bill is intended to and will register to vote millions of illegal aliens. That is exactly what the Democrats want to do with this bill, is register millions of illegal aliens. And the text of the bill acknowledges that, and it says the illegal aliens who are registered to vote, even though it's against the law for them to vote, they face no liability because they're automatically registered to vote. Not only that, this bill prevents
We should point out, just pause for a second,
from addressing that.
That there's a woman in jail, I think in Texas, serving significant time for that exact reason. It's a very good improvement to this. If people aren't certain about their citizenship status and they go vote, that shouldn't be an expulsion offense or something to lock them up for. It's ridiculous that it is.
It doesn't get counted. And also, what, for the most part, people who are here and don't have documentation don't go out of their way to do is vote and get noticed by the government. This isn't a thing, but continue.
Although one more point, sorry, just on the note of taxation without representation, it's also documented that these people do pay a lot into taxes, even under like false names, but they aren't represented by votes. So I think they actually, unless we can make sure that they aren't paying any taxes, which of course we're not going to.
They don't get their tax dollars back in the form of benefits. Yeah.
Exactly.
I have to say before I, condemn
Hold on, let's
what
just
he was.
continue with the clip really quick, and
Sure.
then we'll dive into it. Sorry, Brandon.
No problem.
There's only like 3 seconds left.
Oh, really? Okay. I thought there was more because he says child molesters. I read the Guardian article about it too, but we can
Wait,
just end it.
play these last 3 seconds, because if it's literally just him saying child molesters, it could be pretty fun.
Oh, right.
From addressing that, from correcting the voter rolls, prevents the states from removing dead people from the voter rolls to facilitate voter fraud.
All right. That didn't have the child molesters part, but I digress. Go ahead, Brandon.
No, I was just gonna say, maybe it's the low res of the video, but Ted Cruz is looking a lot better than he used to. I mean,
it's
like
the facial hair.
Yeah, I mean, he looks a little bit like Ra's al Ghul, like a little bit of like a Ra's al Ghul going through a bulking phase, like when what's his name, Liam Neeson was playing him. Very very good look. It's a better look for him. I can't deny that. On the other hand, I mean, let's say everything he's saying is vaguely true, right? That even on the worst case scenario, somehow a handful of people who are unable to, or rather who shouldn't be voted, quote unquote, end up voting. It's like, in a world where you register everyone else, all the other citizens, that should be drowned out just by the numbers. Theoretically, people who, we'd have everyone else voting too. But you can't say that, right? You can't say that like a handful of people doing the wrong thing is not enough of an excuse to justify everyone else having their rights taken away from them. But that doesn't make any sense. Even if you concede his point, like, okay, well, let's say like 50, 50,000, even 50,000 people who shouldn't be voting, 50,000 dead people left on the voter rolls. There are 300. There are so many American voters. It shouldn't matter. It really shouldn't matter. But that's just the appealing to the punitive nature of our country. You know what? If even one person might do the wrong thing with this power, no one should be allowed to have it. And it's just all very like asinine.
Right. I mean, this is the same. Honestly, I feel like I've heard this speech 1,000 times before from these guys, right? I mean, these are the same scare tactics they've used about this very same thing since the beginning of time. I mean, really, it's but Ted Cruz, obviously, it comes off a little bit more, I guess, sniveling from him.
Sniveling.
Yeah. Sniveling. Thank you. Yeah, it is nice. He's got a nice new hairdo going on there, right? That's new, right?
Hides his weak chin.
Yeah, I didn't mean to like give him a compliment about the beard, but if you look at him before he had that thing, I mean, he's a very
different man. No, different man. I'll say it. You don't have to say it. Like before, he looked like a wax statue brought to life by like profane magic. Now he looks like pretty normal, like completely pretty. Like I wouldn't pick him out as like the weird one in the crowd, like I did when he was in the Republican primary.
Listen, I can tell you
marketing off it now too. Check out these cool spring. Get your spring break.
Oh hell yeah!
Job, Ted
this
Cruz.
is my.
I can tell you that
on the
he
majority
looks
of our
not great
website,
here,
right?
though. Honestly,
I want a documentary made of every guy who bought that.
Yeah,
that looks nothing like Ted Cruz, though. That looks like. This might seem like a fourth reference, but that looks like the plumber from Bob's Burgers from the side with like a mohawk. That looks nothing like Ted Cruz.
No, you're right in terms of that. It doesn't look like him. What it looks like is I don't know if you guys know this, but like in punk rockers who have mohawks, when they don't spike it up, they just like comb it back like that, and that's exactly how it looks like. That's exactly how it looks like.
It's just like a mullet. It's a kind of mullet type haircut.
What does that slogan mean? McConnell in the front? Do they like McConnell?
Well, I mean,
I guess he means business in the front, party in the back, right? So McConnell is all business.
So he's bridging. That's how they're bridging MAGA and the McConnell, elite.
Oh,
right?
Is that what that means? Is that what that shirt's supposed to convey? I was
think
not
so.
Getting that at all.
I mean, that's what the actual party in the business in the front, party in the back of a mullet usually.
Because it's not it's not a dig at McConnell. It doesn't seem like, which is kind of surprising.
It seems like a protest Cruz shirt. I'm just trying to understand what it's saying about him.
It seems like a dig on McConnell and Ted Cruz, because if either of them look like the other in the front, that's not a good reflection on either of their faces. But I'd rather look like Ted Cruz than McConnell, to be honest with you. But that's a real devil's bargain.
It's also just a bad shirt. I'm not really giving it much thought because I don't care so much because it's an ugly shirt. But I think it's just his new way of branding himself post Trump. Yes. After he was implicated in that kind of Capitol riot where that cop got beat to death. He's trying to.
Interesting though that you. Interesting though that it doesn't say, it says McConnell in the front, but it doesn't say Trump in the back. It says MAGA. No mention of Trump on that shirt.
Well,
at
you
all.
gotta, abstract the movement from Trump, because Trump is no longer the head of the MAGA movement. Oh,
Yeah, it's bigger than me.
It's bigger than him because he's off Twitter now. So now there has to be somebody to sort of take over the reins of that media machine. And, Ted Cruz doesn't have any charisma, but he does have a beard now.
He does have shamelessness, and speaking of branding, he is trying with all of his might to make HR 1/S1 the Corrupt Politicians Act, or whatever he kept repeating with his faux outrage there. And I love how he said the Democrats' priority is not dealing with COVID. It's this, like, because that's not going to be an effective message as COVID actually begins to be dealt with in an effective manner and the vaccine rollout ramps up under Biden. That's just really one issue. It's just you're not going to have a good lane there, Republican Party, in attacking the Democrats.
It is weird though that you would call it the Corrupt Politicians Act if you wanted to be like, when I first heard him say that, I was like, why would you have a problem against an act going after corrupt politicians?
It's a
like,
little convoluted. Yeah.
Like that's what my first thought was. Like, I think
it's good messaging. I mean, people don't like corrupt politicians. So then, if you come out against it, you have to come out against the Corrupt Politicians Act. And even if it's only vaguely related to that kind of, the kind of corruption people think about when they think about corrupt politicians, like self-dealing, like Andrew Cuomo, even if they don't think of Andrew Cuomo, it still like conveys the kind of like good messaging, like that free money act they were giving away. They tried for, like, that was good. People want to know what they're voting for. They want to be able to support things. I think that's important. That's why, and to me, I think a good example of that was how silly Ted Cruz sounded in that clip coming out against the Corrupt Politicians Act. Because he just goes like, these Corrupt Politician Act, they want to register everyone to vote. And it wasn't until the end I was like, oh, he means like illegal immigrants. I was just, because everything up until
he had to explicitly say that.
Oh yes, illegal aliens. So not just immigrants, but also like I assume space kind, which is probably for the best.
Right. All right, you guys want to go back to the phones? Let's hit up 541. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi. Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you. What's up?
Great. My name is Samantha. I'm calling from Vancouver, Washington.
Hi, Samantha.
And I wanted to bring up I wanted to bring up an interview that Ben Dixon did this morning with Dr. Nicholas Freudenberg, I think is how you say his name. They discussed like our society's dependence, like as a species, on these like overly processed foods and monocrops, and how this has degraded our metabolic health as a species. They touched on what this means in terms of COVID. And I was wondering if you guys could discuss this along with the concept of like food sovereignty and the fact that like Bill Gates has bought up a bunch of land to grow monocrops and has invested a bunch of money into like soy-based meat alternatives. And yeah, go ahead and discuss.
I don't know what the discussion was on Ben Dixon's show earlier today, especially in terms of how it relates to COVID. But I think when not just you, when anyone's discussing these things, especially now, I think you need to toe a careful line because there's a lot of conspiracy theorists out there who are jumping on this type of stuff and not addressing the real issues. Like you mentioned, Bill Gates buying up this land. It is extremely problematic that one extremely disgustingly wealthy individual. There's a lot of noise in the background, so I'm gonna let you go if that's cool, and I'll continue addressing your question. But thanks for the call. It is disgusting that one extremely wealthy individual is able to buy up all this land and just accumulate land mass. I mean, that's a problem, and who knows what he'll do with it in the future in terms of corporatizing it and creating farms it'll just fill his pockets. Who knows what he's planning to do with this from a monetary standpoint? But a conspiracy theorist will hear what you just said, and they'll start spreading that you can't trust any of these soy-based foods or anything like that because Bill Gates is putting 5G chips in them. He's tracking you, and of course that'll be the thing that catches on, and that'll be why people think that's a problem. And then that's not the problem, because that's not what's going on. The problem is, like I said, one extremely wealthy individual is accumulating resources to obviously benefit himself monetarily. What do you guys think?
Well, I'm not familiar with the particular conversation this morning, but, when you talk about monocrops, to me, I think about, again, the capitalist extraction of wealth from the global south to the global north, and monocrop culture in various parts of Africa and various parts of the, South America has been one way in which they've done that, right? So you're talking about leaving entire countries, entire swaths of countries, entire swaths of the, world incapable of self-subsistence because they just are entirely exporting their crops or using their land to develop crops for other countries. There are places in Africa that grow chocolate or grow coffee where the people who are growing that stuff have never actually tasted coffee or chocolate bar, right? Or rather, a cup of coffee or chocolate bar, because that stuff is just completely outside of their realm of, experience and accessibility. In terms of what it does to our diets, we've seen some of that in the past. There used to be a campaign against high fructose corn syrup in America because of the effect it had on people's bodies and livers, which kind of then became like an anti-high fructose corn syrup thing, which people might remember those commercials from way back in the day that just had like the moms at the backyard barbecue, and it would go like, when one mom would bring out some ice pops or something, and the other mom would go, "Hey, does that have high fructose corn syrup in there?" And and then the other mom would go like, why do you care? It's just like sugar. And it's like, it's not just like sugar. That's why they have to make these ads, obviously. But I say a lot to say this. It's just, the monocrop conversation, even divorced from sort of the effects it has on our biologies, making us more obese, leading to rises in diabetes and other sort of what they call maladies of I forget the word, maladies of like the first world, essentially, is that, there is a detrimental effect it has on just the entire human race's access to diverse foods, right? Because we're growing corn on all of our land, or we're growing chocolate on all of our land, or we're growing, tobacco or something like that, as opposed to having more local farms that grow a diverse, series of crops that are, also not just concerned about human biodiversity, but just the, biodiversity of the land. The deforestation that takes place in places like Brazil is oftentimes to grow stuff like soy, to make big soy plantations, to make monocrop plantations. So it's just it's a big compounding issue.
Right. Absolutely. That's a lot right there, and a lot of great stuff. And I want to your point about like high fructose corn syrup, and again, the reason for that is corporations were looking to save a buck. Like it's cheaper. It's bad for you. It's not as healthy for you, but they weren't trying to going out of their way to poison people. That was just one of the side effects to saving money. And that's what it came down to when it comes to saving money. That's what it's all about. Right. Yeah. So, I'm sure there's a lot of moms out there, like the ice pop mom we were talking about, thinking that, some major corporation was trying to implant something in their child's brain through high fructose corn syrup, And I think, when you get to that, you're losing a lot of people who could actually be allies in the fight against these mega corporations, against the capitalistic system for lizard people and nonsense,
Well, I spend a lot of time in conspiracy circles, Matt. So, I'm aware of the kind of mentality that goes into it. And I always just say as a shorthand way of kind of, knowing whether you're talking about a legitimate sort of like, hey, this is something that's happening right now that like you can look into, like, yeah, for like we have large corporations that are extracting the wealth and buying up land for water reserves in South America, just like in that James Bond movie. Totally a real thing that's happening you can look into. And then you have people who think that that's being done to like please reptilian space aliens. And from my kind of vantage point, you can kind of tell where your conspiracy is going off the rails when it starts substituting like, systems of oppression like racism or classism or capitalism with more esoteric things like schools of mystery, like, oh, it's the Illuminati, right? Because that's really the sleight of hand that we see. It's like people are very willing to, explain to you that the media is controlled by, let's say, 12 large companies or 12 billionaires, but that just becomes a lead into a conversation about aliens when, there's no need to go that deep into it, or because like that's the big thing right there. It's already insidious just in that.
Right. You guys want to go to another call? Let's do it. 513, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hey, you're on the air. 513.
Hello?
Yep.
Hey, this is Andrew from Ohio.
Hey, Andrew from Ohio. What would you like to talk about today?
I was thinking about as I was perusing, in Telegram, you can take a peek into certain chats, and I found out that along with this QAnon claim about pedophilia, the sovereign citizens got in on it.
Yes.
And they have something called International Treaty for Natural Justice.
Right.
And I think they might be trying to construct another kangaroo court to kidnap some politicians. Like, when you think of sovereign citizens, you usually think about these people that are like, oh, am I being detained? I'm not driving, I'm riding. But that's not the full extent of the sovereign citizen movement, as it is like a pseudo-legal grift.
Right. Well, yeah, we saw that
has actually been responsible for kidnapping politicians.
Right. First of all, I want to ask you to send me that stuff on Twitter. DM me what exactly you found. I want to look more into it. But on a broader point,
okay.
what you're saying, I mean, that's one of the reasons why, like I would say the biggest story in this country, at the very least, was the planned kidnapping of the governor of Michigan, and that was Boogaloo Boys, who had who believed in the whole sovereign citizen thing. Like they felt like they had a right to arrest her, to do a citizen's arrest on her because she was impeding on their freedoms, and that gave them the right to kidnap her. I mean, it's sovereign citizen. The sovereign citizen beliefs have really been around for a long time, and usually you see all these various groups that get big throughout the years. They each pick up a little bit of that. They each grab a little bit of that sovereign citizen movement to say, well, the rules don't belong to me. In fact, the rules don't apply to me, excuse me. But in fact, they actually give me power to do something about the actual things that are being done. The non-real laws, I can actually do something about them.
Despite, the whole term sovereign citizen being an oxymoron.
Right.
Brendan, are there any good place?
Brendan, it seems like you would have something good. It seems like you'd have something good to say about this.
Me, Brandon, or Brendan? Brandon.
Oh, did I say Brendan?
I
meant Brandon.
That's good, because I have nothing interesting to say about this, because I don't know anything about this space really.
Well, actually, I don't know much about sovereign citizens other than like the videos that come out anytime they almost get a parking ticket. And those are, I think, what Matt is referring to. Like, those are the funny ones. Like, oh, anytime they get pulled over, they explain that they're not like legally, a resident of the state of Arizona and they don't have a driver's license or insurance because, et cetera, et cetera. But I think what Matt was hinting at, sort of like this idea of, an escapism from authoritarianism that is the U.S. government in their mind, is something that I was thinking about a little bit earlier when you sent over like the sound sheet notes and, the whole Biden's coming for our guns thing. And for me, sovereign citizens, they make sense in a context of an American sort of culture where a lot of people feel like authoritarianism is for other people, but not for them. And sometimes when we talk about the whole, like, how can people want to cling to their guns in case the government ever comes to, like, you know, arrest them or take them or, like, you know, take away their rights, but they also support the police. It's like, well, because, like, the police are for someone else. You know, the police are for, like, criminals, quote unquote, brown people. You know, the army's for someone else. It's for people overseas. And so for me, I think sovereign citizenship is, like, in many ways of the logical extension of, like, the kind of uniquely individualistic ideas that America has kind of implanted into citizens to make them feel like they should, you know, not look to the government to give them money during COVID-19. And so, like, I can see how a sovereign citizen could get to that place where they're, you know, trying to deal with the authoritarianism and making citizens arrest of Obama over the Iran deal and all that other stuff. Like, you know, it happened in 2015. Because ultimately there is this undercurrent of, well, you know, I live in the suburbs. I have a AK-47 or AR-15 in my house for, like, both criminals and the government who's supposed to deal with criminals in case they ever decide to, like, you know, make me the kind of a target of authoritarianism that I think is for other people. You know, whether the Boogaloo Boys identify with, like, just sort of broad, sort of really wide, shallow libertarianism where, like, everyone should have civil rights or voluntarism, or it's just a coded racism, who knows. It's more so that, like, this is very much a through line in America, I think. Sorry for rambling there a little bit.
No. I mean, really, I'm gonna let you go, caller, because there's noise in the background. But thanks for the call. Yeah, really, like you said, it's really like my own, like your own personal authoritarianship. Like, you get to be the authoritarian sovereign citizenry. Like, that's really what they want. I mean, they're not happy.
I understand it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I understand. America sucks. It's super violent, and, like, the government's always clamping down on people. If you had the option of, you know, getting out of that situation, you definitely would, just by, like, you know, calling yourself a sovereign citizen. Makes perfect sense.
But the issue here is that the people who go around calling themselves sovereign citizens aren't like what you just mentioned. Like, it would be good. Like, if I was, my own personal sovereign citizenship would be like, the rules from the police don't apply to me, and all people, no matter their race, religion, creed, we all are free from this tyranny. Like, but that's not what these guys want. These guys want, you know, their white supremacist little world where, you know, the police are still around to make sure the black people and the brown people aren't bothering me, but, you know, they can't touch me. Emma, what would you like to talk about? Because I just realized that me and Brandon have been nonstop here, and you're just
I'm listening. I did want to cover this Janet Yellen thing. If you guys could pull that up. This exchange with Elizabeth Warren is fascinating.
Oh, it's an exchange with Elizabeth Warren. All right, sounds good to me. I was about to say nothing sounds more scandalous than a Janet Yellen story. But if it could be, though. Let's see.
Well, let me just quickly give some context here. So, Janet Yellen faced some questioning by Elizabeth Warren at a hearing held by the Senate Banking Committee about BlackRock, which the Biden administration has a cozy relationship with. Many of a few at least former BlackRock employees, executives are in the Biden camp. It's not quite as direct as, say, Citigroup was, with just basically picking Obama's cabinet appointees. So there's a slight improvement there, but not enough of an improvement. Elizabeth Warren questioned Janet Yellen about why BlackRock is not held under a basically stronger oversight standard because of their massive size. BlackRock has $9 trillion in assets, which is more than the annual GDP of every country except the United States and China, which means maybe it should be held to a larger oversight standard. Let's take a listen.
It's not obvious to me that designation is the correct tool to address.
Well, no, wait just a minute. Designation is what gives the Fed its increased oversight power. Is that correct? Is that correct?
Yes.
And is BlackRock currently designated so that it receives that increased oversight?
It isn't designated, but I think it's important to understand.
So that means it is not receiving the increased oversight from the Fed. So my question is, are you currently looking at designation for companies like BlackRock, $9 trillion companies like this?
Well, as I said, FSOC has looked at this issue in the
I
past.
understand they've done it in the past. I'm not
And did
asking about what the last Secretary of the Treasury did. You are the head of FSOC now. And the question I'm asking is whether or not FSOC is considering and looking at designation for these large financial institutions.
Well, I think it's appropriate to designate institutions whose failure would pose a material risk to U.S. financial
And that's why I started
stability.
my question with, does potentially a $9 trillion investment company pose some risk to the American economy if it should fail?
Well, one needs to analyze what the risk is. An asset management company is very different than
you
a bank.
analyze what the risk is if you're not actually doing the investigation through FSOC?
Well, FSOC has undertaken such work in the past. And as I said, when it looked at asset managers, it issued a report outlining what it saw as some of the most significant risks
So I
from
appreciate
those
that they've done this
industries.
in the past. Are you continuing that investigation now?
Well, I'm just beginning a work program with FSOC, and certainly risks from asset management will be on the list.
I understand that when the stock market is going up, it is easy to ignore risks that can be building up in the system. That was the mindset of the regulators that led up to the 2008 crash.
So what's fascinating about that is what Janet Yellen is hinging her lack of designation on is the fact that BlackRock is not specifically designated as a bank, but under the Dodd-Frank Act, which is already threadbare, but one of the regulations that it put in place is that special scrutiny for banks is put in place when the bank has over $50 billion in assets. CNN Business writes, BlackRock has 180 times that amount of assets. So it doesn't have that too big to fail designation, but because it's not specifically a bank, Janet Yellen isn't looking at that. One would think that a behemoth of a company like BlackRock, just because it doesn't fall in that specific category, would still pose a massive amount of a threat to the economy if it were to take on increased risk. And it should be looked into, which is why Warren was questioning her so aggressively there, because it's a massive it's a deliberate, in my view, oversight based on the Biden administration's connections to BlackRock and the fact that BlackRock has dipped its toe into basically all of the major companies in the world and is I think certainly too big to fail.
I'm surprised that clip hasn't gone around more because, right now, all I ever see is that whenever a Democrat dares to challenge Biden, a Biden administration official, they get tons of flack. I'm surprised. Maybe it's because it's too I don't know, political or insidery for most of Joe Biden's defenders to understand. But I mean, kudos to Warren for really hammering her on this.
Well, I mean, this is where she feels most comfortable, right? If you get outside of these spaces, it's not that good. But in many instances. But in this way, I mean, I think she cornered Yellen here, and there needs to be some sort of review, which this is, again, I keep pointing this out as a tell that the Biden administration engages in. When they answer that they're going to conduct some special investigation, that they're going to engage with some sort of third party that's going to look into X, and then they'll hire a task force that hires a team, that hires a cabal, that hires, a group of stuffed animals to look into things. Yeah, they're not going to really do anything about it. So BlackRock has significant connections with the Biden administration. It's not a coincidence, in my view, that Yellen is tiptoeing around this. And the narrow provisions of Dodd-Frank should not preclude a supposedly progressive Treasury Secretary from being more thorough on issues like this, because BlackRock does pose a threat to the economy, even if you're looking at it from their narrow capitalist lens.
Right. Did you guys get to clip 5? No, let's get there, because I saw this yesterday and that was something else, really. I mean, all right, so you know how Democrats are trying to make something as important as voting, which is a right, and everyone should be able to every citizen of this country should be able to take part in this right. And Democrats are trying to make it so it's easier to vote. And Republicans aren't too happy about that, because if more people vote, then it's less likely Republicans win. And this, I don't know if I want to give it up to her, but this is one of the more interesting takes I've ever heard about why voting shouldn't be expanded to, I don't know, more than just one day. Let's take a listen to this clip. This is this is Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith.
Very much for
Thank you.
Senator Schumer's question was, he was wondering why on Sundays Georgia would not participate in an electoral process of gathering signatures of registration and things on Sunday. And I would just like to respond to that. Georgia's a southern state just like Mississippi. I cannot speak for Georgia, but I can speak for Mississippi on why we would never do that on a Sunday or hold an election on a Sunday. You know, this is our currency. This is a dollar bill. This says the United States of America, in God we trust. Etched in stone in the U.S. Senate chamber is in God we trust. When you swore in all of these witnesses, the last thing you said to them in your instructions was, "So help you God." In God's word in Exodus 20:18, it says, "Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy." So that is my response to Senator Schumer. Thank you, Madam.
Wow,
that is.
Well, no, she speaks for her constituents that are white and that are Republican.
Well, I mean,
because those
there must not
church
be any.
drives are huge in registering people. That's why they want to eliminate it.
Right. Go ahead, Brandon.
I was going to say, I'm sorry. I was going to say there must not be any Seventh-day Adventists in Mississippi. You know, really throwing a big portion of the Jehovah's Witness community under the bus. So,
I mean, literally any religion that has a Sabbath day on a day other than Sunday, aka a number of religions that aren't Christianity. I mean, should we shut down from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown for Jewish people? I mean, seems like it makes sense to me. A lot of Jewish people in this country, you know. I mean, why not?
Frankly, I agree. We shouldn't have the voting on the weekend at all. We should have it on throughout the week, every week-long holiday. We all take off. We all get $2,000 to vote. You know, I still want my $2,000.
Yeah, we agree. Cindy Hyde-Smith, pay people to vote and make it a federal holiday on the weekday. There we go. Boom.
Yeah, I mean, she's right. Some people do celebrate Sabbath on Sunday. Some people celebrate on Saturday. So that's why it has to be multiple days of the week. It should be a whole week. There's no real reason it should be one day other than to, again, punish the working class who won't be able to get away from work. You know, there are plenty of people who just can't get off.
This is right. I think a direct response to, the Souls to the Polls movement that was happening in Georgia, where people would take whole congregations of Black churches, like Ben Dixon was telling us in Georgia, to registration drives. And it's just
so Black people had no problem. They didn't feel like they were any less loyal to God or holy by going to church and then voting on Sunday. But apparently, Senator, what's her name again? I don't even remember. Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith. She knows better. She's holier than thou. Excuse me, Saint Cindy Hyde-Smith knows that God would not want voting on Sunday. Also, one thing to point out. What was her go-to for where her biblical beliefs lie on the almighty dollar, right? I mean, that was the first thing she went to. Whip that dollar bill mighty quick. It's etched on the dollar. So that means just like how God wanted his word right there on the monetary system right there, right? I mean, give me a break.
I feel like this is the kind of statement people make right before like video or photos come out of them like on a Sunday doing something incredibly unholy, or like, oh, at a football game drinking beer and eating shellfish, and like wrapped in bacon. And you're like, and then we have the whole conversation about how she's a hypocrite. It's like, well, yeah, obviously, but I'm waiting for that moment.
Right, it'll come, absolutely. Yeah, unbelievable. I gotta say, there's it's so ridiculous. I don't even know what I was gonna say. I had something in mind, and it just went right out because it's just too much.
But that's the exact point, Brendan, about souls to the polls. That's the exact thing that these laws are targeting, and that kind of speech by Hyde-Smith is targeting. And if she's so against the politicization of churches, then basically the pastors and the televangelists that are from Republican areas, the white ones who often say without saying that you should vote for Republican politicians, they're not allowed to do that either.
Right. Southside Brewer in the IMs, I should say, brings up a point. By definition, the Sabbath is Saturday. It comes from Judaism. There you go. Right.
Got him. See?
Got him.
That's what you call the logic, tap out on the logic octagon.
Right. HR Data Monkey says, just got my first dose. I feel myself reaching for my flannel shirt. Can't resist. Oh no, is that what happens when you get the vaccine? That's the side effect. You wear flannel.
That's side effect, the first dose of Brandon. Flannel shirts.
Right. Bria Kuda says, Binder, have you seen the HBO show about Q? If so, what are your thoughts? I have not yet seen it. I will be watching it. I've heard that it's better than the Vice one. I heard bad things about the Vice one. Haven't seen the Vice one yet either, but I'll watch that as well. My number one, there's a new QAnon documentary on HBO. It's like a 6-part series. I think only the first episode has aired so far. This one apparently is more legit than the Vice one. It has some interviews with some people I think are very legit in this world, like Jared Holt and Will Sommer. You want my feelings about it? My biggest complaint is that none of these QAnon documentaries are asking me to be in them. What's going on here? Where's my invites? I want to be on a big Hollywood production. What's going on here? God.
You can invite me to be in your Flat Earth documentary. I don't know much about QAnon, but if you want to talk about Flat Earth and you have a Hollywood level budget, definitely reach out to me.
I will if I ever have that Hollywood level budget. I like how you added that addendum. Like if you just want to talk about Flat Earth Society or anything like that, don't talk to me. But if you got the Hollywood budget, then I'm on board.
Well, I feel kind of. Of course, obviously, you got to have proper lighting and makeup to do it justice. But I was gonna say I kind of agree with you. I wasn't aware of a QAnon documentary on Vice or HBO, but I tend to avoid more mainstream documentaries about conspiracy theories because they just tend to exist in this kind of weird dichotomy where, like, you see the things that you read in our outlets are true, and everything and everything outside of that, as represented by QAnon sometimes or Flat Earth, is just in a world of fantasy or fiction, which kind of rubs me the wrong way, especially when you talk about just how many like factual errors and like conspiracy theories appear in the pages of just our regular press. So I find kind of that like implicit divide between like, well, the things you read in conspiracy theory sites are markedly different than the things you will read in some journalistic sites that we have arbitrarily decided are like being vetted properly.
Right. One thing I will say about this HBO documentary that's going to be interesting in the coming episodes, though, that no other documentary has, is that the guy who made this one has been working on this for a while. And before QAnon blew up or anything like that, before 2020, I think he started in 2018. He has access, or he had access, and he has filmed interviews with Jim Watkins and Ron Watkins, the two guys, the father-son duo who run 8kun, who are believed to be the people behind Q, the anonymous account And, you know, no one else has that. So I think that's what a lot of people are looking forward to seeing in this specific documentary. But that hasn't aired yet, so I can't speak to how important what he got from that was.
Matt, just real quickly, Matt, I want to offer an addendum. You know, I believe that Q actually stands for Quetzalcoatl. And I was informed of this by the classic Roger Corman movie. So, you know, really, we should be on the lookout for the large winged serpent.
Right. Got it. J-Bag says, great interviews today. There is no problem at the border, but there is a horrifying lack of empathy north of it. Put those unaccompanied kids in foster care, or better yet, let their parents through and pretend like the pursuit of happiness is something even non-Americans have a right to. Also, Ted Cruz practices human emotions in the mirror, right? Mrs. Cloutfire says, sovereign citizens claim to be libertarians, but deep down, they just think that there's some way to speak to the manager of America that enforces these super secret special rules. In a sense, they're like level 100 Karens. My one addendum to that would be they want to speak to the manager of America, but they are also the manager of America. Right, really cool says, did Emma do her Jimmy Dore story yet? Could I have missed it? Emma, is there a Jimmy Dore story that I've missed out on?
No, I keep teasing it, but Sam keeps forgetting. We're gonna do it tomorrow. Basically, Jimmy, he praised Dave Rubin, or defended Dave Rubin, and compared him to Walter Cronkite. So.
Oh, I saw this on. I thought you had like some like insider Jimmy Dore knowledge from your time at the Turks.
Not that I'll say publicly now.
Oh, but you do have some. Oh, I gotta. Emma, you have any free time for a call later?
Nothing crazy. It's nothing crazy.
Okay. Reese's Pisces says, if you want more context on that Ted Cruz clip, check out his and Michael Knowles' podcast this week with Governor Scott Walker. They ironically cited Gramsci this week, which was a little eerie.
No, I wouldn't call it necessarily eerie. Ted Cruz is, you know, Ivy League graduate, according to himself, and you know he's telling us that. But the far right, at least the ones who read, do have a very Gramscian understanding of like power, in the sense that like the things they complain about are that they don't have control over this, like, you know, in their mind, liberal hegemony that infects popular culture. It's like, you know, they're really just mad that there are not any like famous Republican or conservative, you know, athletes. There are athletes, but I mean actors or like, you know, media like moguls who people like look up to. And the idea that they're being crowded out on college campuses because young Republicans are just like, you know, little weird nerds is just completely, I don't know, what's the word, unacceptable to their framework, even though they control all the actual levers of power.
Right. Let's go back to the IMs. We won't have any more time for calls today, folks. We're just gonna do a few more IMs and then that's the show. Christo says, a captive MR listener since birth. 6 years ago on this day, my son Teddy received his first shofar. Today he is 16. Can he get another? Ooh, I don't know if we have the shofar.
Here, I gotta stand up. Hold on.
All right, while Emma runs over to do that, I will read a few more. First, I'll give you what I can give you. I will give your son one of these and one of these. I hope you guys heard that. I'm not sure, but I think so.
That was great, Matt. That was great, Matt. Do you have like a helicopter taking off? Yeah, like a DJ Clue mixtape.
No, I don't. I need to get more on my own
work?
sound. Yes, it did.
Nice.
I also have one of these I could give your son. But happy birthday, Christo's son. Benito says Biden's nominee for Deputy Secretary of Interior was withdrawn at the behest of Lisa Murkowski. Thoughts? I actually did not see that, so I have no thoughts. I need to read up and find out more. Does Emma or Brandon?
This is my first time hearing it as well.
Yeah. This seems like something Emma would do.
Headlined it a few days ago.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, it's Murkowski throwing some weight around with Anwar and all that, and also being a possible, you know, partner for the administration and trying to pass some legislation in the Senate.
All right. Sammy Key says Cuomo praising Tom Brady in his daily press conference the day after the Super Bowl for some reason. So many douche chills. Isn't Tom Brady a full-on Trump guy too? Right? And isn't Cuomo's whole shtick?
I think he's just like a weird guy who, you know, golfed with Tom and golfed with Trump, and so
Displayed the hat.
doesn't really have any politics.
Displayed the hat seems like a pretty big deal.
He
The
did
golf
actually,
thing,
yeah. I mean, I think someone like Peyton Manning's actually more Republican diehard. Like
You think-
he's an actual donor.
You think Cuomo, whose whole brand is Mr. Anti-Trump, that's why he was such a hero during COVID, would be a little bit more careful about praising Tom Brady. Biden and the California Raisin says, hearing Ted Cruz say, "I just came" is the most disgusting thing ever. I didn't catch that one.
The first few seconds of that clip when he said that he was where he was coming from, the hearing that he was. Unfortunate. Yes.
Right. Married to Mothra says, remember when his brother said Fredo was a slur for Italians? Cuomo, right? Yeah, Chris, right.
No, he said the full N-word in that clip. He didn't just say it was a slur. He said the full word.
Did he
Right.
really?
And how did I thought you're right. He did say the N-word and not the N-word.
Yeah,
He
it's
said
easy to
the
forget
word.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he said the word.
He said the gamer word and not the one you said earlier, Brad.
Yeah, not noob, the other N-word that I'm working on reclaiming back from gamers so I can say it on shows again.
Right. Oh man. And he got away with it from the same people who like would jump and try to like cancel any leftist for like having the wrong take or something like that.
It was part of like the Cuomo sexuality phase, like, a little bit of a race play they were added to it. He's Italian, they're another person of color. It's all very, involved. I don't want to get too deep into it.
Well,
It's
Italians
disgusting.
are still a protected ethnic group, according to CUNY, I believe.
Really?
I mean, that's what like
Oh.
that's
Well,
what
I
like
gotta start- I gotta start flaunting my Italian heritage.
it's like BIIPOC, Black, Italian, Indigenous people of color, right? Is that... Irish still not allowed for some reason, but
Right.
New York Post, Italian Americans say CUNY must uphold their affirmative action status. February this year.
Oh boy. Majority Report wardrobe coordinator says, I've never smoked weed in my life and I can't wait to not smoke weed this weekend.
me as well. My plaid friend.
Right. I gotta say, I when I said that before, I was legit. I've actually never smoked weed, if you can believe it or not. Sam's hanging Chad. Binder, thanks to your last show about Lauren Boebert's wrestling background. Great show, by the way. I am now taking on the title of Coxman. Thanks for adding that to my vocabulary. Oh, why, thank you. If you guys don't know what that's all about, you have to listen to last week's episode of Doomed at doomedpod.com or youtube.com/MattBinder. Just a few more like one or two more IMs, and then that's it. Country Mouse Tech, the show before Michael Brooks passed, he and Sam talked about analyzing that Como poster. I got to go back and watch that now because I would love Michael's take on that poster. That poster, when I first saw it, was, oh my God. Emma's distant cousin, old Matt, I hope you had a fruitful 316 day filled with beer and stunners. No beer, plenty of stunners. And the final IM of the day is from this is pretty good. Intel Prol says it's Bipoci, Bipoci. Sounds more Italian.
Good way to end it.
Folks, youtube.com/MattBinder tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern time. The 12 anti-vaxxers who are filling up your family and friends' Facebook social media feeds with all the misinformation and conspiracy theories. That's 9 p.m. Eastern time tonight at youtube.com/MattBinder. Matt Leck, you're doing a show tonight, right?
Yep, that's right. 8 o'clock, Shama Sawant, Wazi Lambre. Check it out, folks.
And what about you, Brandon? You got something coming tonight or down the line?
I do have something coming up down the line on the discourse, but I'm going to use this time to advocate for more temperance amongst our viewers, because really, the sin I'm getting off the chat, even though I'm not looking at it, is just overbearing. And as the soberest member of the show, both currently and just, in totality, I think it's important that we all.
We're going by soberest, but that's all the time we got.
We are.
We'll talk more next Thursday, the fun half, and catch the Nomiki show at 3 p.m. In 20 minutes on YouTube, and the rest of the Majority Report crew will see you tomorrow. Bye, everybody.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there.